Everybody, welcome to the regular meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District. Today is Saturday, April 11th, time is 8 a.m., and I call the meeting to order. Michael, do you have any announcements?
Hi, welcome again to the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility regular board meeting. This meeting is being fed live over the internet, and the public can view this meeting by going to www.kmpud.com and following the appropriate link. If the public would like to make a comment or ask a question, please email msharp@kmpud.com and the board will respond. I'd like to welcome Casey Bland, our Vice President and GM of Vail Resorts, who will be taking an agenda item, and I also see Terry Woodrow of our Alpine County Board of Supervisors here. Welcome, Terry.
Peter, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Ricker? Here. Andy? Here. O'Grady?
Here.
Dornberg here. And Epstein? Here. We're all ready.
Item number 4 is oral communication / public input. This is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board on non-agenda items relating to district business. No action can be taken by the board on matters not appearing on the agenda. Does anybody from the public have any oral communications? Hearing none. We'll move to item 5, which is corrections to the agenda or to the consent calendar. I believe you have one, Michael?
Yes, I have two, actually. I'd like to move item 8, General Manager Report, to after the action items. And I would like to defer on action item 9C.
And for those of you without an agenda, the consent agenda has minutes, committee charters, general district election, consent for claims and receivables. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
I did find one error in the minutes, so maybe I can just, I was actually not present for the last vote on that, so I'll just send that to you.
Yeah, I move we approve the minutes as modified by Bob's request.
Okay. Adopt the consent calendar too?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So we'll move on to item 9A. General update and discussion on current activities and summer planning from the ski resort operator, Vail Resorts. Casey, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Can you sit up there, Michael? Or
No, you're fine right there.
speaking with Mike last time, which was in front of you.
He does need to.
Kelly will just have the mic there.
Good morning. Welcome, members of the board. Thank you for inviting me here, and us to the community as well. I appreciate the opportunity. As far as Michael sent me a couple of questions relative to thoughts you folks had talking about the season that we just went through. Unfortunately, as you may know, being a publicly traded company, we cannot divulge specifics to individual resorts. We generally talk as regions, and that's how we pronounce on our quarterly findings. And I'm pleased to announce that as many of you may have heard, Rob Katz announced as of the end of Q2 for us, which runs through the month of January, we were up 32% in resort EBITDA overall. So very good as a conglomerate, and we're very pleased with our performance to that point in time. Obviously, Q3 ends, or not obvious maybe to some, but Q3 for us ends end of April, and then we'll be putting together our financials and reporting out, so at that point in time. But overall, I don't need to tell you about the snowfall. I mean, obviously, all of you lived it, or to those that have been out trying to enjoy it. It's been a challenging year, no question about it, especially out in the Tahoe region. Utah to a little less degree, but Colorado had a very wonderful and has had a very excellent snowfall this past winter. So very good in that regard. So overall, Vail Resorts is sitting well. We just announced recently the purchase of one of the largest ski resorts in Australia, Perisher Resort, which will add an opportunity for us to build strategically, as we've tried to do on our Seasons Pass initiatives. And that is to get both international visitation. True to the Australian markets, they generally visit Japan, they'll go to Europe, and they'll go to the States. And so we feel now with the opportunity with Perisher in our mix, we'll be able to have almost year-round skiing capable. And passes reciprocity will occur between the resorts of, Perisher, Blue Cow. I believe there's 6 resorts in Australia that are part of our package, which will have access to the American resorts as well. So we're excited about that, and excited as we push to international opportunities, this being our first toe in the water, if you will speak. So anyway, overall very pleased to that. I really can't divulge anything more about our financials about Kirkwood, but if there's anything in general you'd like to ask about Kirkwood, happy to. Otherwise, I'll go to the other questions that Michael had.
Well, I'd certainly like to hear about your plans for the resort, what improvements, what expansions are on board, and how you see moving forward.
Yeah, it's probably you guys are tired of hearing me say this story, but we've been looking at options and alternatives for Kirkwood in many facets. Obviously, I get the most common question is about lift replacement, about things like that, parking, certainly on-mountain lodging in terms of not overnight lodging, but restaurants, those types of facilities, thus to not have the guests coming back to the base area for lunch, whether it be over here at Timber Creek or over in the village area, which generally does the lion's share of our business. So we're looking at everything, Bob, as always. And this season was a good start, and then as snowfall tended to dry up a little bit, we didn't see the continuation of the numbers as maybe we were hopefully looking toward. So in terms of that, our overall visitation was excellent early on, and our base elevation, as all of you know who live here, gave us an opportunity to really show our benefits relative to us receiving snowfall when many of the others unfortunately received rain. So we were happy about that, but looking forward, we're still taking it all in. There won't be any major significant capital investment in Kirkwood other than our continued efforts towards some of the maintenance issues which we're catching up on and incrementally knocking off the list in lifts, in buildings, and in basic infrastructure. And one of the things that you folks may be interested in, of course, it's no secret, we're looking at options and alternatives for things such as parking, and we're looking at one option being the widening of Kirkwood Meadows Drive as one potential. Parking is one of the things that we are, I would comment, not woefully inadequate, but not up to where we would need to be in terms of supporting the rest of the resort functionality. Our lift infrastructure, even our facilities at the base area are adequate as to large visitation numbers, but where we're most challenged is parking and being able to safely and efficiently park, as well as ingress and egress movement out in the resort. So those are the basics that we're looking at and will continue to.
So Casey, on parking, you were at the meeting yesterday with TriTac, and obviously a lot of concerned members of the community there. Would you be open to participating in any ad hoc committee, maybe with Kirkwood Resort Development or whatever they're calling themselves, and perhaps a couple members of the community to come up with a overall integrated plan? I expressed my concern that KRD may be developing this parking lot in somewhat of a remote area, piecemeal, meaning we don't know what your needs are. You're the major beneficiary and needer of parking. Would you be open to that or not?
Well, certainly, we'd be happy to be a partner in the community as we have been on Standish. And so to that end, as we develop our options and alternatives, obviously we're looking at cost-effective measures which provide us an effective opportunity. So we've been looking at with local engineering staff what options we have. Unfortunately for us, we don't have a whole lot of base area private land. That wasn't part of our acquisition thought process going forward. It was mostly resort-based at the time. So the developer has by far the lion's share of developable or adequate space for developing parking, other than we do have obviously the Kirkwood Meadows Drive. But getting back to your original question, we'd be pleased to play a role with the community.
We'd appreciate it because at least from my perspective, we can sit down and say, here's how much parking we have. Here's what the resort you need, Kirkwood resort development doesn't need parking, and here's how we get there. That might meet with a lot more support and less opposition than, that piecemeal project plus the widening of Kirkwood Meadows Drive, which I think your organization initiated over about a year ago, and I don't really know where it stands. So if it's okay with you, we'll ask Michael to follow up on that.
No, that's fine. As I mentioned, we'd be happy to play a role in the community as a partner, as we've done previously. Looking forward. Parking, there's other issues, of course, that we're looking at as well in terms of supporting the business. Our service levels are things that we're most proud of, service and safety, and we think they all have a play in terms of how it works and how the whole piece functions. I mean, if the lifts work great, wonderful, but if the lodging and the food and beverage facilities aren't up to that speed, or if the parking hassle or in and out or safety related issues are a concern, I mean, it's all the big picture. It's all the total functionality of a resort experience that we need to have, and we feel right now that parking is one aspect that Kirkwood, on our busier days when we're hopefully trying to service the greatest need for the folks that come in here, and do so with the mindset of being conscientious about also the members of the community as well.
Casey, you mentioned checking off your infrastructure list and maintenance and so on. Is the snowmaking equipment infrastructure on that list?
And yes, annually we review and assess and maintain our equipment. Annually we look at, such as I'm sure all of you know, there's a manifold that is in place in Caples Lake, which is where our draw for water comes from for our snowmaking purposes. And this past season, we operated and found a crack in the intake manifold. And annually, as to your question, we'll go in with divers, bring the manifold up, do inspections, and assess. And that will be part of our ongoing maintenance function. Snowmaking in general, just so everybody knows, we typically have run a 2-month period of November and December. But then again, it depends on need. We've run it longer when seasons dictate that we need it. So there is no timeline that says we have to operate from X to Y. We can extend that as long as possible, along with obviously our situation with when we can take water from Caples Lake.
This past winter, I understood you were somewhat limited because of that damaged manifold.
Well, it didn't affect our performance really, not until we were at the latter parts of December. But at that time, if you recall, we had great amounts of snow, and we were feeling really good about our ability to sustain our service levels for our guests.
Great. There were some other things I think we asked you to cover, such as summer activities, or anything else you want to communicate, frankly.
Thank you. And again, thank you for the opportunity. I know I've been getting some questions about summer activities, especially as we announced Epic Discovery, which, to those that aren't aware, is our move within Vail Resorts to expand our summer options at a number of our resorts, specifically Breckenridge, Vail Mountain, and Heavenly. And those resorts were identified by virtue of the ability to provide greatest good for the greatest number of guests who are already currently in those regions or areas. Visitation to Heavenly, as an example here regionally, is very good during the summer months, and people are looking for other additional activities there. So our first foray and strength will be in Heavenly. Here at Kirkwood, we will sustain the existing activities of the mountain bike park. We are working with the third-party vendor, who is the Zip Tahoe folks, to see when and if they can get their operations back into effect. If, to those that don't know, they operate over here on private land owned by the resort here in the Chair 7 area, and they unfortunately are working with the state of California to do some changes to their zip line to meet current specifications for the California State Tramway Board. So anyway, we're working with them. Not sure if their operations are going to get back into effect this coming summer, but we certainly hope so. And as far as other activities, we're trying to promote to the best of our ability events that bring in the folks that want to come visit us in the summertime, and that includes weddings. And believe it or not, weddings are off the chart this summer. We have more weddings scheduled for this summer than at any point, I'm told, in the last 5 years. So be it economy, be it whatever, we're not sure, but love is in the air in Kirkwood. But anyway, so we're happy about that and excited about the opportunity to start people out on their lives out here at Kirkwood. So we're looking at all options and working with the Forest Service, of course, too, in terms of, what their concerns are, needs are, or passions are relative to, work on federal land. So it'll be status quo, working toward it. And, it's good for us too, obviously. We keep folks employed during the summer months that otherwise wouldn't, that are available for us in the winter as well. So it's a win-win. And we hope that the community sees it as such, and hopefully the community will come on out and enjoy the activities up on the hill to the best of their ability.
Just to get into one specific detail, looking at the electricity reliability and the harmonics and the lifts and that, I'm just wondering if you can comment on where things are from your perspective.
Well, we're thrilled, quite honestly. Obviously, this group in front of me, I'm speaking to the choir, but it was wonderful being on the grid this past winter, the reliability, and with Michael, I had my every 2-week discussion with Michael, which is very, helpful for us. We got a good understanding of, the processes of the Up Valley project, and we were excited. It's not a question anymore, it seems like, to our staff that have been here for many years as they drive into the valley, whether the lights are on, and the ability to keep that, power sustained. And we were excited, quite honestly, Bob. It was great in terms of the reliability and the consistency of the performance. Now, if your question is also about, the lifts and lift-related issues, we're certainly, as part of our deferred maintenance challenges that we're, knocking off the list. Power quality is one that we've discussed, and actually I had a discussion with Michael just the other day about, our next steps. And so over time, we're hoping to work with the community and work with the PUD here to sustain an even better performance relative to our lifts and any potential feedback that comes back down the line from the harmonics.
Okay.
Great.
And there's actually a related question. The former operators of the lifts, got a D or an F environmental rating. I don't even remember who does that anymore. And one of it was the fact that it was all diesel. So, now you're 25% renewables, as is everybody else. I don't know if there's been any thought about promoting that, or it would be actually not much money to buy more RECs if you wanted to be 100% or something like that. So I'm wondering if you thought about that in terms of the marketing plans. There's our.
Yeah, I have discussed that with our folks back in Colorado, the benefits to, being on the grid, performance, reliability, and as you say, some of the renewable sources of energy that are available to us. So we're excited to be a partner with the PUD relative to the ongoing opportunities that are out there.
Okay.
It's appropriate to open up to the audience who are raising some hands. Nancy?
Hi, Casey. Good morning. I think it was last year that on the top of the wall you put in a new patrol shack up there, and I'm happy you were able to do that for your staff. But I would request that you take a step back in the off-season and look at the visual impact and figure out a way, isn't there, to make it blend in a little bit more, because the eye seems to go to that area. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, we're working with the Forest Service on that too. It's not only the look from here, but also from the Silver Lake side, and so we're looking at various options to, make it blend in a little better. So thank you for that comment.
Thank you.
Paint it.
Stain.
Casey, I wanted, first of all, to thank you very much for doing such a good job grooming the cross-country trails this year. Since Vail has taken over, it's a wonderful improvement, and it helps a lot for us and also for our guests wanting to return. And then, I know you have a lot of things on your plate, and Kirkwood's on the bottom of the pile of the Vail resorts. But one thing that's...
Don't make I see a lot of denial.
Well, that seems to be the major message. But one thing that it seems to me that you could vastly improve without a lot of capital outlay is the dining experience. And our children and our children's friends who are in their 30s and 40s have even a harder time than we do of having no place to go anymore that has decent food. And I think if you ask anyone in this room, they'll tell you that the food has even gone downhill. It's gone from poor to bad to very bad. And in all the restaurants, even the Kirkwood Inn where we used to go and hang out, and now it's just terrible. And you don't have to build any more square footage or provide more parking if you could just somehow get your food and beverage people to have one place that perhaps has decent food. Yeah, Does anyone else agree with you?
At a reasonable price.
I just want to add, no MSG, that is really nice, if we can get to that point on most of the food.
Okay, well, thank you for the comments, and I appreciate that coming on the grooming, and I passed it on to the folks. They take a lot of pride in doing what they can, even though marginal conditions are often the
Yeah.
case. And
Yeah,
I appreciate
even
that.
yesterday, it was, we had fun, even though it was a little
Yeah.
fun.
I talked to Jeff Eklund, who's our head grooming person and snow services director, and he says it's down to 8 kilometers this morning, so he's doing his best to hang it in there. So anyway, but and thank you for the comment too on the food. We have gotten feedback to that effect, and we have new management that's coming in. The director is the same, but she's getting greater support in terms of her efforts going forward, and an overall focus by Vail and Kirkwood, even though I know you may feel we're on the low end of the ladder. I don't feel that way. I feel very proud of the fact we've been able to give our operations the boost that it's needed over the years. So food quality is a big focus going forward, so bear in mind. But thank you for that comment.
Thank you. Judy?
Along the lines of food service and food quality, it is so cold, for example, in the inn, that they bring your food out on a hot plate, which is great, and by the time you've been there for 2 minutes, the food is cold. And it's uncomfortable. Not only is the food not what you exactly wanted, but you're freezing to death. This was last night, and it's not too cold.
Was it? Okay. Thank you. I'll follow up on this.
Any other questions for Casey, or should we let him off the hook?
That's all right. Anything about the bathroom?
Well, thank you again for coming, and we appreciate you joining us. We'd love to see you or any other Vail representatives, periodically, just so we can keep the communication dialogue open.
Yeah, Saturday mornings are generally a little busy
Sure.
for us, but thank you for the opportunity to address you, and I look forward to doing so in the future and working with the PUD. I think you folks have done an excellent job, and I commend all of you to the efforts and extra time and effort. I know it's not fun sitting on a board sometimes when you got other lives, but I think you guys have done a wonderful job, so thank you. And I can't say enough about this guy to my right. He's a wonderful spokesperson and a wonderful person to work with as far as the resort's concerned, very fair-minded, and he holds the line for you guys very well with us, so you can also keep that in mind. But thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll move on to 9B, which is discussion and possible action on a request by Vail Resorts to waive penalty and interest fees in the amount of $35,386.41 on a past due receivable. And this is Manager Sharp.
Vail Resorts has submitted a request to waive the district penalty interest charges in the amount of $35,000 for a delinquent payment of the January bill. This was the first month of our email billing system with Vail, and there was some hiccups with Ecova, who's their outside vendor that actually pays their bills for them. They received the emails from us, but this was the first month in doing so, and there was hiccups in the operation, and once they realized that they had missed the email, they actually had also missed the payment. Vail has requested this waiver, and they have submitted a plan acceptable to staff to ensure that this does not happen again. They provided 2 secondary email addresses to the district to ensure that if one of the individuals of the recipients is out of the office, the other one can take its place. Now that the templates have been scrubbed and Ecova's data entry team has been trained, these invoices will be processed immediately upon receipt. Ecova is fully staffed and has a solid backup system within the other teams on the production floor to make sure that they get these payments made. And for Vail Resorts, they have a checklist system now to ensure that this gets paid on their end of the month checklist. So this plan seems acceptable to staff. They have actually paid the delinquency as per district policy, so the penalties are not being incurred on penalties. So the penalty has been paid as per our policy. And they have agreed to cover our administrative costs, which are estimated to be less than $500 for us, for Jill's staff to actually back off these charges. So I feel confident that this is a one-time issue. They have not asked for a credit in the past since, we've been with Vail. And so the general manager would like to approve this request, and I just want to make sure that this is brought to be before the board because of the dollar amount and make sure that there was no opposition.
Any opposition?
So you said you were covering your administrative costs as part of the deal, but since the penalties are supposed to cover interest, is there any other category of actual cost impacts to us from the non-payment, or are those negligible?
I would believe those would be negligible as far as interest lost on.
Yes, it's interest rates are so blowingly high.
Yeah, but they have agreed to cover our costs. I anticipate those costs to be under $500 for the time to reverse those charges.
And the Finance Committee reviewed this and agrees with staff's recommendation.
Any input, comments from the public?
I just note that the payments were received, less than a week late, correct?
Please proceed. Moving on to 8D, discussion of possible action regarding the district's financials, efforts to reduce expenses, and financial impacts of the continuing drought on the district's finances. Assistant Manager Jill Campbell will cover February financials, March forecast, and cash flow to by department enrollment. Welcome, Jill.
Go ahead and start with February financials. The balance sheet is on page 26 of the packet. And it shows that as of February, our operating cash was $2,669,000, down $416,000 from plan. The large reason for the variance, as discussed, is we didn't receive Vail's payment in time. So that is reflected in the March cash balance. Our accounts receivables are up from plan for the same reason, because Vail was past due. We had a higher accounts receivable balance. And the last note on my balance sheet is our accounts payable balance is up $1.9 million from plan. That's decreased from previously. We have deleted an invoice from PG&E for about $2 million, and there's a $1.3 million payment to PG&E included in this accounts payable balance, but it was paid in March. Go ahead and go on to the income statement unless there's any questions on cash or anything like that on here. The combined February income statement shows that our revenues are down about $214,000 from plan for February. And with keeping costs down, we're actually pretty close to plan for February. We're down from plan just about $10,000. All things considering, with the winter, year-to-date is actually still up from plan. Our revenues year-to-date are down $592,000 from plan. But with keeping expenses down, we're up $322,000. We've mentioned previously depreciation is down from plan because the Out Valley project isn't complete, so we're not depreciating the entire amount. As well as interest expense was able to stay down due to capitalizing more interest than we anticipated. A couple notes on individual income statements. On wastewater, on page 34, we will see in the individual cash waterfalls what each department is doing, but just wanted to mention wastewater isn't covering its cash loss. Year to date, we are better than planned by $54,000, but if you, and our net loss year to date is $311,000. If you take out depreciation from that, through February, we're sitting at a $52,000 cash loss for wastewater. Electricity on page 36. Our February Operating revenues are down 129,000 from plan. Year-to-date is 322,000 down from plan. For February, one of our expenses that is higher than plan is our contract services. It's up about 11,000. That's due to us fixing the load-dependent start and stop. Year-to-date, our net loss for electric is 73,000, which is showing 358,000 down from plan. That's because we are not showing any property tax allocations being allocated to electric for now. We didn't need the allocation for calendar year 14 RUS filing. And so we've kind of waited to do the allocation. We can do it anywhere from now through the end of our fiscal year to see exactly how much we need to allocate to electric. Propane is page 39 of the packet, and currently it is showing a net loss year-to-date. We'll look at it when we're looking at the budget, but it's looking like with sales down from plan, the rate that we have is not covering our operating expenses. Right now, our operating expenses, if you take fuel out, is 2 cents budgeted. And looking at year-to-date through February, if you take fuel out, what we would need to cover our expenses is 2.8 cents through February.
So Jill, is that because of basically fixed costs that we have
For operating,
for operating?
and if we're not selling what we planned, we're not making,
The number of units times the cost per unit to cover our expenses.
exactly.
Right. So much for that cash cow.
Is there any questions on February?
It's just a general question that there may not be an answer for today, but as I've looked through the balance sheet, you know, the debt ratio seems quite high. And so, you know, I don't hear anybody specifically addressing that issue, and it may not be able to be addressed today, but, and I know there are different plans to try to cut expenses, but it'd be nice to hear what, you know, what the plan is. Makes me uncomfortable as a ratepayer.
Do you want to take that, or would you like me to take a stab at it? Bob?
Oh, I thought you were asking Jim. Go ahead.
Well, we have an enormous amount of long-term debt. 56 million for a combination of the Out Valley. Is it 56 or 58 of Russ? 58. Plus, I think about $10 million from the COP.
Well, we paid off $1 million.
And, you know, it's all long-term debt that we as a board and a community, through a multi-year review process, entered into, you know, to take over the electricity operations, to build a power plant, and to construct the Out Valley project. And, you know, I think the good news, of course, is that it's by and large super long-term, and it's also by and large super low interest rate. And we don't have the ability as a public agency to issue stock like a company would, so it's long-term debt. Now, it's good to hear that people like Casey's workers are happy with the fact that we did this to replace diesel generation. But it's a fact of life, and I think we're just going to have to pay it off. There is a payoff schedule, and we had a long debate over it on the Finance Committee. There's some short-term payments, and the idea is by retiring the debt short-term, which means starting in 3 years. It's kind of funny debt. It's not like a constantly amortizing mortgage on your house. You know, the 3-year debt, there's some principal being repaid, and correct me if I get it wrong, Jill or Michael or Bob, but there's a large increment at the end, and if you aren't able to pay it, the federal government lets you roll it over into another amortization. So it's pleasantly weird. Is that accurate?
That would be the technical term.
I'm going to file for a patent and royalties on that.
And you should collect all that you're deserved.
Thank you.
So can I just follow
Yeah.
up with that, Sandy or Andrew?
Sure.
So just,
Yeah.
so sitting as a ratepayer and hearing all that, and I do appreciate all of your work, having reliable electricity, so on and so forth. So going forward, and based upon the weird statement at the end, so seeing that at the 80+% level, I shouldn't feel uncomfortable about that.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So
The 80.
the debt ratio appears to be up at the 80% range. I mean, it jumped down a little bit from the prior month. So as a ratepayer, as a community member, I shouldn't feel uncomfortable about that. I should be okay.
80% of your cost is in
Well, I'm just, based the simple debt, your.
debt over assets?
Yeah.
I don't think it's something to be proud of, well, as Bob once said, I think it really boils down to if it snows. And if it does snow, I don't think you should be uncomfortable. If it doesn't snow and we keep having anemic winters, I think you should be uncomfortable.
Okay. thank you.
Any other questions or comments from?
No, I think that was, the entire strategy was based on, if you believe this is a long-term opportunity as a resort, then we've made the right decision. If it's a short-term one, then we incurred debt that we wouldn't want to have. And the middle ground is, if this is the typical winter going forward, can we still make it work? And I'm not sure I know the answer yet.
Yeah, the way I think about it is, I think as we all discuss this, I think in the backs of our mind were at least the hopes that first of all the economy would recover, and so that people would want to have money to invest in a place like Kirkwood as they have in the past. And in fact, that's happened at least in the Bay Area and amongst people who might buy up here. The second was that Vail came in, and I think that we all were cautiously optimistic that would mean more investment in Kirkwood and more attraction. I don't think that's happened, and I don't know when or if or when it will happen. And the third is that I think that although most of us, if not all of us, are concerned about the climate change and the impact on ski resorts, I think most of us have thought that would be a slow process rather than an immediate process. My friend Bob Endy here was warning me about potentially immediate. Who knows whether this is a result of that and what holds, but in any case, I think that we're banking on at least reasonable snow. So 2 out of those 3 things have been disappointing so far.
And as to whether you should feel uncomfortable or not, I'll just share one final comment, which is we, as a board, would like to have an electricity rate decrease, but we may have that opportunity if we get the depreciation change that Michael will talk about later. But with the cards that we've been dealt, if we do have an electricity rate decrease, it's good for the ratepayers. It may not be so good for the district's finances given current conditions. If they improve, it'll be fine. But if they don't, I don't know that it's the prudent thing to do. And so while you might feel better as a ratepayer, you should probably feel a little more nervous about the district's finances. And then the only other thing I'll say is that I think that there's some people, starting with myself and Alan, who think that our total bill from the PUD for this winter was lower than prior winters, primarily because of the reduced propane charges, both quantity because it's been a warm winter and price per unit because we have a lower rate. We're not trying to run as a cash cow as Mountain Utilities did. And in fact, I think we're losing money a little bit. Now that we've beaten that one to death, any other questions, comments from the community? Since we have 2.5 pages to go, let's move on. Jill?
In the packet on page 41 is a preliminary March income statement combined. The operating revenues shown are true and won't change. The operating expenses are our best guess at this point, as we haven't closed the month. But for March, our operating revenues are down $300,000 from plan, making us down $893,000 year to date. For March, with our reduction in expenses, the net loss for March, we're anticipating at $109,000, which is down $175,000 from plan. Year to date, our net loss we're projecting to be down $198,000, but still hitting plan and exceeding it by $147,000.
Great. So moving on to cash flow by operations.
In the packet, there is an updated cash waterfall. Page 42 is our combined, and then following that, we've broken it down by department. A couple of changes on the detail, the combined. It was requested to separate loan interest and principal payments, so that's been done on here. Another change is the previous versions were using our last year's approved budget for projected revenues and expenses. This version from July through February is using the updated draft budget, which does include cost-saving measures that are already in place, a reduction in staffing, a reduction in consultants. Michael will go over that, but that is included in this cash waterfall. So I did want to bring up that the previous version in December of 15 was showing our operating cash at about $1.5 million. This updated in December of 15, it's showing our updated projection in December at $2.1 million. So it is hitting our $2 million goal.
Jill, I just want to confirm that I understand the line called updated operating forecast.
Mhm.
That is what we used to call just our cash forecast.
Our operating, yes.
General fund.
Yes. The March 2.66 million is the actual cash balance ending March. And then the update, the forecast is what we're projecting based on budgeted revenues and expenses.
So I'm sort of confused in that last month I thought, and I went back and looked, but I thought that our cash was getting significantly lower than we wanted to, and
Correct.
Right, that's what we worked on.
yeah, and so now with these revisions, the plan is that we will just barely miss that $2 million minimum, and we'll miss that in September of 15 if the projections bear out.
Yes, mainly because, I mean, we have done a lot of reductions in our operating expenses, but also previously, we were using last year's budget for what we were projecting for revenues and expenses.
Right. No, I mean, congratulations on that. I mean, I just also want to be sure I understand it and what the changes have been that have enabled this string of forecasts.
And I'll be going over that in just a moment.
Okay.
But what it says is our low month is not December, because the old way we used to do it, the season would start up. We incur expenses and then not collect the revenue till later. Now it's September because we have, $1.2 million of debt payments.
Right.
September is when we pay the COP principal payments also.
Yeah.
Pay that monthly annually.
Any questions on cash flow from either the board or the audience? Great, so we'll move on. Thank you, Jill, that's great. Continued good work and progress, and we appreciate it very much. 9E is also Jill, 2016 to 2020 budget planning, presentation of revised overall budget with balance sheet and 5-year cash waterfall.
This is pertinent, answering Eric's questions that this kind of overlays between the current financials and our budgeting process. So due to the drought, the district has put many cost-saving moves in place. As you know, we've reduced the staffing levels of temporary employees. We've drawn back on the fire department. We had full-time staffing. We drew back on that. We've eliminated 3 year-round staffing positions. We've eliminated all capital projects for the balance of this fiscal year and the entire 2015 and 16 fiscal year. And we're doing a very careful review of our capital project to make sure that we only have to issues in place instead of wish list issues. So we've made quite a bit of progress as far as being able to reduce our costs, and we're looking at additional ways that we can reduce in the future, just to be prudent if this drought actually does stretch into a 5th year. This includes looking at our staffing levels for the summer of 2015 and beyond, review of all capital projects, as I mentioned. We've now budgeted the switch station as a 4-year project rather than a 2-year project, allowing for the construction costs, which are the majority of the cost, to be further in the future, up to $2.7 million. I think 1.9 of it is in construction costs, and everything else is preparing for that. Looking at the switch station budget and seeing, this originally was more of $1 million or 1.5 million. Now it's grown to 2.7. How can we get that back under control and have some time to do so? Reduction of consultants, I think, is a really key issue, and we're trying to be very cognizant of our costs. Budgeted increases for salary and wages, and just trying to improve efficiencies through our performance reporting. And that really does help, being active with the efficiencies and how much our losses are. So I just wanted to make sure the board was aware of our cost-saving measures. I think it has made an impact, and if you have suggestions, please let us know. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jill for budget presentation.
In the packet is an updated budget draft. Changes to this draft. This updated version includes a 3-year income statement by quarter and a 3-year cash forecast by quarter. The cash forecast, I'm saying that because it's showing balance sheet, but the last 2 years still need data entry. We focused on the cash at this point for the 3 years. On the quarterly income statement, a line has been added to the bottom just to show principal payments, so we can see a better idea of where cash sits.
Jill, I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm going to have a series of questions, and by the way, I would support an idea of having a special meeting to have more time to discuss and review this budget if other board members feel the same need as I do. Because I know, with a long agenda, it's hard to spend much time on these things in these meetings. But for example, December 31st operating funds for FY 216 budget is $1,928,000 in this. How does that tie back to that cash flow thing you just saw?
The main difference on this compared to the cash waterfall is we do accrued accounting on the income statements. The cash waterfall shows property taxes when they're actually received, and this shows accruing $70,000 or whatnot a month. Same with snow removal revenue. On the cash waterfall, we're showing when it's actually received, but in the income statements, we split that between October and May.
Okay. Yeah, I understand the accounting. It's just difficult to look at one thing and see one set of numbers, and then look at another thing and say, whoops, it's a different set of numbers. a little complex.
And which sheet were you referring to where you said that where you showed the principal payments paid?
If you, on the quarterly combined income statement, it's page 56 and 57.
Okay.
At the very bottom,
Right,
it's showing
there
our
we go.
principal payments by quarter. Some of the key assumptions that have changed in this draft is that our operating cash for the 3 years is not showing any capital expenses being funded through operating cash.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
Uh-huh.
Just two other comments
Sure.
on page 54. One is the number, the total current assets under September 30th. Is that 892? Shouldn't that be 892 plus the 11 million above?
I'm sorry,
September 30th, 2015, total current assets shows $892,000 total current assets. That's simply the sum of the 3 lines above it. The total assets, wouldn't that add the $11 million under total
Yes.
funds?
oh, yes.
And then there's this big blank area in terms of assets. Is that because you haven't done all the entries that you talked about? Propane, water, wastewater, there's nothing listed for assets, capital assets. I know
Just
we-
in 15, there is for the
16.
16.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, I think I didn't see that, but electric equipment, I think it might all be combined in that, but I can
see.
break that out.
I see, okay. Thanks.
As mentioned, capital expenses are being looked at. We're looking at what our need to. So in this version, for the next 3 years, we're not showing capital expenses to be taken from operating cash. Another change in this version is that the electric rates from 2016 to 20 are budgeted to decrease from 68 cents to 65 cents a kilowatt hour. And propane budget assumes that rates will increase from 7.5 cents to 7.9 cents to cover our operating costs. And that's based on, we're basing that on low years. So that can change if we
There's
get better
volume.
sales.
Does the cash flow thing that we looked at before assume the 65-cent rate?
It does. I just wanted to mention G&A is shown on page 58, and that's where it's showing our property taxes and what is allocated to other departments. Currently, we are using our property taxes first to cover our rest tier ratio, second to cover any cash losses in departments, and if there's anything left over, the plan is to use that for capital expenses. So showing on here G&A under net available and assigned, that's basically property taxes that are remaining. Budgeted for 2016 after covering tier ratio and operating cash losses, we're showing $69,000 in property taxes that can still be allocated for capital. For 2017 and 18, there is not any property taxes left to be allocated. They're all used for covering cash losses and tier ratio. And then that comes back in 19 to 20, 94,000 in 2019 are available, and 197,000 in 2020. So I think our next steps for the budget.
I just want to make a small, I think there's a small thing I want to clarify on that. the property tax, it actually exceeds the available property taxes in those 2 years. So it isn't just that there's none left. There actually isn't enough to cover it. So, I mean, it just says that the assumptions don't fit in those two spots yet. Correct.
And it's not realistic to think that there won't be some capital project necessary. Right, I mean,
Well, if the snow condition deteriorates, then it might be a fair assumption. But the assumption is that there'll be some improvement and then there'll be some allocation, or we'll change rates.
yeah.
Right?
So of the $488,000 of capital projects shown in 2017, how much of that is potentially deferrable? Is this some large portion of it costs of the switching station, for example, which is presumably not deferrable as we see the landscape today?
Yeah, that's exactly what staff is doing, is looking at the capital plan and seeing what is deferrable and how we can fit it in. I think a great majority of the capital plan can be deferred. It's not advisable to keep on, living on deferred maintenance on certain issues and doing repairs, but it might be the reality. So we're going to look at exactly what we need to do and get back in the next version with a solid capital plan. But right now, I think there's a bit of fluff in the capital plan.
I'd just like to add a comment. The direction from the Finance Committee was, so this is the first time we're doing 5 years of budgeting instead of just one, and it's being done 3 months earlier than normal. And we're trying to say, given these set of assumptions and continuing bad snow years, where does the system, where do the pain points occur, and then how do we address them? So since we still have 1 more month until staff will have sort of a final proposed budget, you're seeing work in progress and you're seeing the pain points. There isn't enough capital here. If we lower rates and it's the bad snow year, we can't cover everything. So we're seeing where the problems
It's
are.
a multi-process.
Yeah, and then we'll add it back in. It's probably unreasonable to say there'll be 0 capital improvements over 3 years. But, if there's no snow, that's probably what we would end up choosing to do. So it's easier to add it back in than to bake it in and then try to remove it.
I got a little confused about the good 2017 versus not good 2017, or whatever the term
We'll
may
get
be.
to
So
that.
this is all based on the good 2017, or?
No, this is assuming that this was a typical winter going forward.
Okay, got it.
And doing the good, only shown in here is electric, and it kind of showed, I need to look at that. We were basing it on 2010-11, what was actually done. But in the Finance Committee, it was discussed that there's probably other things we need to look at. The current good doesn't really show a large change. So we need to look at if it was a good snowmaking,
And are we going to discuss that now? We're going to discuss it later, that particular
Right
issue?
now would be good.
So one of the things we've done is we've tried to develop a model for what the ski resort consumption looks like based on weather conditions. So we now have, for at least 2 years, for every chairlift and every snowmaking operation, we have, what they've actually done. So for example, Casey said December was good revenue. I can tell you the chairs didn't turn very much. And our revenue was almost all snowmaking in that period. So we want to know the answer that if this year was a good snow year, what would be the additional revenues from utilities? So we can put that in. So we're trying to model at least one case. Just saying, if we go back to 2010 and assume electricity sold like it did in 2010, how would that improve things? And to try to get some sensitivity analysis to what is weather, what would it look like to have a happy financial year? How much snow? That's the question. How much snow does that mean? And so that's the start of trying to figure that out.
Alan?
Just a thought on that. Perhaps in Michael's next meeting with Casey, you could ask them a little bit about how they come up with their revenue numbers. I'm sensing that there is a seasons pass allocation. In December, they were ecstatic about their operating results here. And I'm guessing it's because a lot of Heavenly Pass holders came out here and skied. So to the extent that they're allocating revenue here from passes they didn't sell here, it might help us understand the difference between them being happy and us not seeing chairlift's returning.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do think the advantage of Vail over past is if one region does well and another region does poorly, they report good results.
Yeah.
And if you only have one operator here and no other, or one other results somewhere else that they don't aggregate, I mean, that's our ability to survive, have the operator survive mediocre years.
And at the corporate level, they realize someplace is always going to be bad.
Yeah, but what we really want to know is how many kilowatt hours. I mean, revenue is nice for them. We just want to know how many kilowatt hours based on how many seats are being lifted up the mountain.
I think there's also an impact with the Vail's quality of service and what they're trying to produce and the increased revenues they're trying to produce per skier, while we're more of a quantity-based business, and we just want the lifts to return and put a lot of people on them.
I think understanding how they account for revenue will help us understand how.
I think that's right.
we do that.
That may be a hard question to get an answer to, but I'm just guessing.
You can't ask.
Right.
Yeah.
Please continue.
So next steps for the next version, finalize assumptions and update our year-end projections with March actuals. Currently, year-end is still showing, I believe, January actuals. Update the capital plan, as we've discussed. And currently, we're showing 3 years in income statement and balance sheet. We need to expand that to 5 years, not only for income statement and balance sheet, but for the cash waterfall. These are our next
Great.
steps.
Any other questions or any questions?
My only comment is that 30 minutes going over this set of numbers in discussion is a little sparse for me anyway. I mean, I've got questions I'm not going to ask right now just because I know that things are still evolving and we have a long agenda. So I would like to suggest that if after our May meeting there's still questions, I mean, I know that the Finance Committee looks at these more carefully and has more time and certainly have a lot of faith in that, but I don't want to be just a rubber stamp on a recommendation. So, obviously I could sit down with Michael and go over it, but I think that leaves other people who may have similar questions out in the cold. So if after the May meeting things still seem to be shifting and a little complicated and so on, I'd really like to suggest that we have some sort of a special session to just focus on the budget.
If there's questions too, that would affect a next version, I would welcome an email with those questions, something that for staff to look at too.
Right.
Yeah, in advance of a special session, if we're more prepared, it'd be great, to have answers at the special session rather than say, we'll get back to you at another special session.
Let's just see what happens in the May meeting.
Great. Well, staff would be pleased to.
I think the most important thing is the assumptions page. If you have questions about anything on that, because everything is driven from those assumptions. The rest could be, we could have data entry discussions and things like that, but if you have concerns about any of that, and the assumption is that the average of this year and last year is business as usual for the next 5 years. And then we'll deal with upside when it happens. Thanks.
So Steve, based on what you just said, so under the assumptions on 11C, where it says 215 is based on actuals through December 2014 and budget from January through June, so that'll change to what? I don't, in the next version. When do you actually?
That statement's actually not quite right currently, because it's through February. This changes every time we get more data.
Oh.
So this version is from a month or two ago, so we're currently through February at the moment.
So then the next version we see will be through March?
Yes. Yeah.
We'll update the assumptions.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you could fix 11C and say it's through the most current
Yeah.
period, which at the time of this was.
That's a good
Yeah.
suggestion.
because that statement keeps changing. Thanks for catching that, Nancy.
Any other questions, comments? Shall we move on? Thank you.
The only other thing I would like to say is, this is a lot of work, and so thank you, Jill. This is really well done.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to 9F, discussion and possible action regarding the final issues and ongoing maintenance associated with the Out Valley Power Line project. Michael Sharp. So there are 4 sections here: construction, contract closeout and completion, fiber line update, station service update, update on repair of section of underground cable installation along Highway 88 near Places Resort. Since this is mainly an update, I would suggest we let Michael go through all of it and hold questions to the end, but if you have a burning question, feel free to ask it.
Out Valley project closeout task. We are very close to receiving our as-built from Dave Rightly for all 3 of the different projects. This is a huge step to get these as-built done. We're looking forward to seeing them. We are working on the final retention payments. As the board is aware, we retained 5% of the total contract amount. We're starting to get the closeout documents ready for a closing out of the SWIP and the different permitting permits that we have out there. In the final paperwork, as far as the notice of completion, the certificate of completion, et cetera, we are scheduled to be before the board on schedule next meeting. So looking forward to putting a stamp on that. We do have a couple of issues out, but we plan on retaining enough of the retention in order to cover those issues, one of them being the fiber issue, which I will get to next. So as the board's aware, on March 2nd, the district was notified that the T1 line was down at Silver Lake. The line connects the district, PG&E, and Cal ISO to the outside world. It's vital for protection, et cetera. We found that the water was transversing through the conduits, filling it up, and when it got to Silver Lake, the actual conduit raises above the frost line and actually formed ice, and because of the thaw, the melting and the freeze-thaw action actually broke the fiber line. We have got a letter to go out to Q&D that illustrates that the plan specification calls for the telecommunication lines to be sealed, that the electrical line to be sealed at the sectionalizing cabinets, but note not at the vault. So the specifications do not include the sealing of the cable and the conduit space at the vaults. They also call for the spare conduit to be sealed. That's the 2-inch spare conduit, and the splice connectors to be hung up on the wall rather than be lying in the water. So a letter will be going out to Q&D detailing the results of a comprehensive survey that we took of all 80 vaults. We took pictures, took pictures of each one, and we're asking for a meeting to discuss not only what the repair issues as far as becoming them doing the issues that were found on the repairs, but also the resolution of the costs incurred to date. We've actually had costs from Edge, Exponential, RCI, and of course district staff has spent quite a bit of time on this. So we want to talk about resolution of those costs. As noted, the district may need to seal the electrical vaults between the cable and the conduit, and we're deciding right now whether that actually needs to be done or not. Remember, the fiberglass line is very delicate compared to the cable line. The cable line is actually meant to be submerged. I mean, it's direct buried cable that's enclosed in conduit, so it's actually meant to be. And but once we do a field verification, we may very well want to seal that to eliminate this transversing of water between the vaults, just to sectionalize the problem so that we can see if weep holes should be installed. So next steps for the solutions, we need to water purge the conduits. We need to blow that water out of them, suck down the vaults, and do a good inspection. And then everything needs to be sealed as far as the caps, the lines around the fiber at least. cap the spares, make a determination in the field whether we need to use the weep holes or not. The weep holes make a lot of sense on an elevation that's extremely high, but on a lower elevation that's above the groundwater table, we might be letting water intrude into the vault, so it wouldn't be such a good idea. We need to make sure that our splices are up on the side of the walls, and we need to evaluate the electrical vaults on what repairs need to be done there. So looking forward to that meeting with Q&D. As far as the station service, this is the backup 110 power for the KM Green. I have good news that we have resolved the issue with PG&E's lack of a special use permit in the area. We have signed a absolving service agreement, which has allowed them to actually schedule the installation of the meter that's actually missing in the picture there. It was scheduled to go in on April 7th, and as luck would have it, that was the date of the snow, so they couldn't get out there, and they have rescheduled it and trying to get out there, but it's not a matter of a permit, approval, or anything else, it's just a matter of access. So we're looking forward to that being installed, and we can actually test that. I have testing protocols on how we can actually test that station service and let this drop off the agenda. Highway 88 repairs, board, remember, we have completed different repairs out there. This is the issue with the slurry creating a dam for the water and then the water coming up and sheeting across. There was some evidence of sheeting in between the two areas that we've already repaired. Caltrans is now back completing an analysis to see if additional work actually needs to be done, where it needs to be done, how much needs to be done, and we'll get back to the district. But it's right now in Caltrans court. And that's the area that we're talking about right there. So that concludes my report on 9F, and I open it up for questions on those subjects.
Question?
Just one. So it's one thing that QED didn't follow the specifications. It's another that the inspections we paid for didn't even notice it. And I'm just wondering where we stand on the failure of the inspections to.
Yeah, so the sealing of the conduit for the T1, putting the, it's clearly marked in the specifications. We've made Exponential aware of this. They have committed to drawing up the repair issues as needed on their dime, and also coming out and inspecting, re-inspecting all the work when Q&D does the work, also on their dime.
Okay, thanks.
So they are remedying the situation, but yes, it was a failure on the inspection team.
Other questions, comments, either from the board or the audience?
The Operations Committee had a robust discussion about these things, so I think Michael's on the right track. I think we agreed, right?
So the inspections, is that just Exponential, or was RCI, did they miss it too?
RCI wasn't in charge of the electrical
Inspections?
portion of that. They were more involved in the trenching and the installation of the cable. So this was the two inspectors that Exponential had out.
Okay.
So what other things did Exponential have responsibility for inspecting, and do we have confidence that they in fact inspected in those other cases?
Exponential was primarily involved in the installation of the cable, which is obvious part of the fiber. So the entire Out Valley line was under the, not the concrete portion, the concrete around the poles and everything was more of a civil RCI issue. But when the lines were actually installed on the Out Valley, that was heavy Exponential inspection. And then as far as pulling the cable, the fiber and the electrical lines through the conduit, more the installation of the direct barrier was RCI. So that was kind of the dividing line. We haven't seen any other issues, or the board would definitely be aware of it.
Okay, rolling on to 9G, continued discussion and possible action regarding the current Out Valley cost estimate. 3 sub-bullets, overall project costs and potential risks, cost of ownership charges, and Russ Powerhouse depreciation determination update. Again, if possible, let's let Michael roll through the thing. But if you have burning questions, please ask them.
Yeah, I'll be doing the cost of ownership issues under 9H on the PG&E issue because it makes more sense. But here is the current Out Valley cost forecast. It's in your packet on 76. There is no changes from the last forecast from last meeting. Nor are there any changes to our expense breakdown showing what our project costs are, the remaining funds in our Rust Fund, and the balance of the current reserve. After this expense, it leaves a balance of $1.9 million in our reserve, as was detailed in Jill's cash waterfall.
When Joe was reporting on our financials, there's something about a $2 million invoice being deleted, and then $1.3 million being paid. Can you explain what that was?
Sure. PG&E billed us a $2 million invoice which we protested. There were costs on the invoice that we did not feel were accurate. They separately agreed that some of those costs were inaccurate and decided to pull that. But they still needed to bill us what was considered an accurate billing of the 1.3. We actually paid that 1.3, and they backed off the 2 million. The balance of their invoices actually haven't been received as of yet. We still haven't seen the balance of what we owe them. So that was a accounting thing from PG&E. We received it, she had to book it, but then we backed it off. The Russ Powerhouse depreciation determination, the Russ committee has met. They have made a determination. We have not received verbal or written, I should say, we have not received written confirmation of what that determination is. We should see that very shortly. Our budget is based on a reduction from 7% down to 3.5%. So we're hoping to see that depreciation letter here shortly so that we can inform the board.
So the last part is that the budget is based on the reduction being included.
At 3.5% rather than, we were at 7%. And that concludes my information on 8 or 9G.
Any other questions or comments from the audience?
Probably a little bit off topic, but when I saw the red stuff in that one picture, Michael, that you had up there, it reminded me before the snow came, walking down Kirkwood Meadows Drive, and the plowing had gone to the point where the red was starting to be exposed. Is there any concern about that? Does that mean they're getting close to the cables, or? I don't know what you call that stuff, that red
Slurry.
Slurry. So,
That's that far down.
okay.
Yeah, so you're saying that they've dug down into the earth to expose the slurry?
What I'm saying is, prior to this snow, walking down Kirkwood Meadows Drive, they had plowed enough that the red was being exposed quite a long way. I haven't walked Kirkwood Meadows Drive yet to see what it looks like right now, but I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting that they've now dug along that and the red is exposed.
You degraded the shoulder, I think is what happened, and it exposed the slurry.
Right, and I'm obviously no expert, but I thought, oh, red, that doesn't sound good.
Well, the red is to get your attention.
I got it.
And you got mine, so perfect. I think we got a good circle going.
Right.
Great. Mission accomplished. Anything else on 9G? 9H, discussion and possible action relating to PG&E's revised system impact study regarding the district's efforts to comply with PG&E's transmission interconnection handbook.
I'm working with PG&E on several issues, a response to the district's request for information on the substation's cost of ownership. We've asked them exactly, to provide a brief description on what the work was done at Tiger Creek and Salt Springs, including the listing of the new equipment. Prior to the upgrades, what was the primary line, what was the method of communication, what was the existing configuration and what was the upgrades in order to make a better maintenance determination on who's responsible for what. The district has requested a meeting with PG&E to discuss this aspect and an evaluation of risks and benefits of the switch station project. And we have met favorable response to that meeting. I've had 2 calls with Marty trying to discuss a timing issue. Board members will be involved in that meeting. So that meeting will be with Marty Hunt, who's the person I'm working with PG&E, and then possibly 2 members of their administration team, Mike Tannenbaum and his boss. So looking forward to that meeting. The interconnection agreement calls for a 4-year project, as this project schedule shows for the switch station project. The district has discussed the concept of attempting to complete this in 2 years with the board and PG&E. This might be accomplished if we could do things in conjunction at the same time, such as them doing the facility studies and us beginning our engineering, design, and environmental work. This poses a risk and a concern with having to redo work because PG&E makes a change in their design. We've already designed past them, and this redoing of work actually happened during the Out Valley project, and we don't want to redo that type of a mistake. So we have asked PG&E to delay any investigation on an expedited project until the system impact study is completed, so we can see the scope of the project that they've looked at, and possibly until after the facility study is done, so we have a very good grasp of what they're looking for on their end, so we can design up to those standards. So this is the project schedule ending in October 2018 with a 4-year project. And this is the budget, still based on the higher number, the 2.7, but this shows what I was talking about earlier with the construction costs coming much later in the, now these aren't all the costs, I just wanted to put the major costs down. As you can see, it doesn't add up, but you could see that in 2018 of the 2.7 million, 1.9 is figured in the last year of the construction. So that's what we're looking at right now as far as project schedule. This could be expedited if we feel that that it makes sense, or it can, go through the full term. The system impact study is well underway. It was approved by the board, and a draft is due on April 24th. So we're in good shape with that. In your packet is a revised system impact study, which reverts the telecommunication language to the original version and allows for incidental costs up to a maximum of $30,000 for such things as a startup meeting, their incorporation of our directives for PG&E system impact study, which we produce and is a part of the study. Once complete, the next step would be a facility study, which is estimated at a cost of $125,000. And this would be initiated, which gives much more of specific information from PG&E's viewpoint on the exact equipment to be used and the possible cost. Staff recommends that the board authorize the president of the board to sign the revised system impact study as presented.
What are the additional costs? You said there were some...
They would be incidental costs. Right? One would be the startup costs. We had a meeting where we let the PG&E know how we felt the system impact study should go. That was one cost, and anything else that the district directs PG&E to study, such as an expedited project schedule, which I mentioned earlier. We've asked them to delay on that due to concerns with overdoing work.
Okay. So we're not locked into those costs?
No, it's just a kind of a miscellaneous category. They're very cautious about going over budget on this project due to concerns that we've raised with the last project.
Okay. And they charge us for startups meetings?
They charge us for, yes, discussing any aspect of this.
Great.
Well, I mean, I'll just say, I think incidental costs that are almost 50% of the main study is rather ridiculous. I'm going to vote no on this, not because I'm opposed to the impact study, but someplace I've got to start drawing a line with this organization, with PG&E. This is it.
Any questions, comments from the audience? And Michael, do you have a recommendation?
The district staff recommends the board authorize the president to sign the revised document, including the revision in the telecommunication and the allowance for a $30,000 incidental cost for startup fees and any other district authorized incidental work.
Okay, so would somebody like to make a motion to approve that?
I move that we approve this.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
No? Right. So 4-1. So moving on to 9I, discussion and possible action related to district's research and efforts to improve the efficiencies and minimize the losses of each department as measured in performance reporting. Manager Brandy Benson.
Hi,
Welcome.
good morning.
Welcome back.
Thank you. So I will start with the electric performance reporting. Shown on the board and in your packet are the March 2015 production and metered numbers. You'll see the total loss of $133,000, which is 16%, and our goal for electric is a loss of 12%. We have restructured the performance reporting format on electric quite a bit. We'll go through those quickly. The identified system losses, KM green and blue transformer losses, these were provided by Dave Rightly. This is an estimate from the manufacturer's test information. So it's based on a kilowatt hour loss per operating hours of the month. Our powerhouse usage, which previously was a pure estimate, is now taken from the meter at the powerhouse, which was repaired during the last exponential visit. We should note that this is a billed usage, so in future performance reports, we won't see this because we'll actually be billing for it. We have
But we
our-
didn't bill for it in March, right?
We're still in the transition, so
Okay.
that's why it's on this March performance report.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, and we are reviewing this number. It looks extremely high to staff.
It does look
Right.
excitingly large.
Yeah, so we're reviewing this. This is so.
This includes the ice skating rink that you installed?
Yes. As far as our distribution system losses, what this is an actual number, which is the feeder relays at the powerhouse, the total of all three, minus the metered. So that is an actual number for the losses in the valley past the powerhouse. And then we have our step-up transformers. That's also an estimate by Dave Rightly. Those are the transformers at the powerhouse which are still in service right now. And our out valley loss total is simply the total system losses minus all of the above. So we do have several action items here for electric. We did have Emerson out to look at some metering issues. We are reviewing their report, looking at the meters that they have found issues with, and this is going to be an ongoing project to fix metering issues on some of our meters in the valley, including the wastewater treatment plant. We are working to review the meter list versus the feeder list so that we can accurately break out the distribution system losses between the three feeders. And we're also taking a look at the step-up transformers.
The distribution list versus the feeder, can you?
Yes, so the
You
list
making
that...
sure the meters are on the feeders within
Exactly,
here?
exactly. We did provide that, and you have given us the
Right.
the breakout, but it's still, we want to review it and
Verify.
make sure that we have all the right meters on the right feeders, so we're giving an accurate picture there.
Right.
And we're also looking at the step-up transformers at the powerhouse to see if shutting some of those down for parts of the year might be a useful thing to do, to save money, but also to provide the redundancy we need for an emergency backup at the powerhouse. Are there any questions on electric before I move to propane?
Based on what you know so far, where do you think the best opportunities for improvement are?
The best opportunities for improvement at this point, definitely the powerhouse. That usage is quite high from what we expected to see. So we need to make sure that is an accurate number and see what ways we can reduce that. And the other issues are going to be in the distribution system. While those are smaller than we expected to see, they're really our only easy opportunity to fix things. The fixed losses on the out valley transformers and the out valley line are much harder to fix.
Okay.
The out valley line loss doesn't match my recollection of what the model called for.
Yeah, we originally were estimating a 3% loss.
Right.
This is exactly what we anticipated or feared in previous meetings, that we're hoping that the distribution loss would be higher because we had more control. It has a bigger impact on our costs, but it actually happened to be the opposite. This really defines that the out valley loss between, this is really the line loss. This is no transformers are included here. This is actually just the line loss. And the cost to run the electrons through that line.
So is there some standard engineering model that you could use to validate that that's the right answer? As opposed to if you ran into the standard scientific model and it told you that the right answer in fact was 3, and we're getting 6.8, then you'd know you've got the disconnect.
We do know we have a disconnect.
Yeah,
So,
the original estimate didn't come from staff, it came from
okay, and that was 3.
That was 3.
So why is it 6.8? He asked again.
If you know the answer, that would save a lot of time.
Water in the vaults.
There you go.
Water in the vaults is a good answer. But that's what exactly staff is researching and working with Exponential.
Is there another way of measuring the out valley line loss beside subtracting known components from the total loss? Meaning,
Well-
is there a way of measuring it at KM green and KM blue?
Yeah, that's the problem with performance reporting on electrical, is the lack of meters. It'd be great to have a meter at each location that you want, so you have to do some estimating. But I'm fairly confident with the transformer, because those estimates come off of manufacturer specs at different load levels. So the transformer will have a load loss, one certain load loss at a very small load production, and a much higher load loss at a higher production. But those comes off the specs. So I think they're in the realm, and they're also actually smaller numbers.
But if we make a mistake in any of those other categories, then the error also applies to our subtracted out valley line
Yes, sir.
loss.
Including the,
Either way.
right.
Right.
So are you going to put meters in place that will allow you to measure the out valley line loss correctly? Is that part of your plan?
That's my question. I think we should, if we can.
Well, two things. One is we got really good news that the relays that we had at the powerhouse were able to actually totalize kilowatt hours, and we have, per se, meters there that we can actually read each feeder, and that's why we have this data that we have today. Now, putting in additional meters to really define, putting one on different areas to define where the loss is coming from is an expensive proposition. We've estimated from $10,000 for a meter at the powerhouse to $40,000 to a meter in the field. And that's just putting a meter on a line. So that's a lot of money. I think that the current direction should be refined to looking at things that, like the powerhouse usage, and verifying what we know today, and then we can bring back definite costs to the district.
Also, seeing this under different load circumstances might provide some insight. So we'll have some light load months coming up, and then we'll have really heavy loads starting next December.
Super heavy.
And that might yield
It's a
some.
planning assumption.
Having more than one data point on this might help before we spend, putting a meter on a 34 kV line is not cheap.
Do you rent the meter equipment, use that approach with some other things, right?
It has to have a location to put in the meter, and that's the expense. You have to put in a vault and
Any questions from the audience or any other questions from the board?
We're grappling with this at a much more detailed level than we have. For a long time, we were kind of frustrated that we were generating numbers that we didn't understand, and we're making progress. And this clearly indicates we're coming to grips with some issues and figuring some stuff out. So I'm happy with that.
All
Thank you,
right.
Brandy.
Moving on to propane.
Right.
The propane performance report format in your packet has been simplified. We have removed everything except for the actual metered, which is what we meter to customers, the propane usage, which is our purchase of propane that is put into the bulk tanks. And as you can see, in March, we had an unmetered total of 62,781, which is 3%. So propane, we do have one action item on propane, and what we are doing in that department is we are trying to identify the oldest meters that are existing out in the field, and we are required as part of the CPUC program to replace 10% of our meters a year. We're working to get the oldest meters changed out first.
And you don't mean the registry, you mean the actual physical?
Exactly, the
meter.
actual physical meter, because
10%.
there's buildup can happen in the meters, which can cause the register to go slower.
Well, seems like a good idea. Can I ask one other question about the propane meters? The new water meters are really nice because they're a cubic foot. So, we can detect a toilet that's running, 4 hours after it starts. But the propane is such a large unit that a slow propane leak in a unit, we'd probably never spot it. And so I'm wondering if we are replacing meters, is there any opportunity to get something that's more granular than the very large number we currently have?
I'm not sure, but I'll look into it and come back.
Okay. And electricity is real, the other meters, it's a really fine measurement, and propane's very, very coarse.
in water, we used to have 100 cubic.
Yeah, I know.
Right, so it would be very hard to find a leak in 100 cubic meter.
Right.
Now it's, I think there's 1 cubic foot meters.
Right. And since one of our goals of the meters was to try to prevent, hazardous situations, with the large unit with the propane, we can't do that as well as we could.
What are we measuring them in?
It's 0.78 times 100 cubic feet. Is that right?
It comes out to be 78.
Cubic
Se-
feet.
It's
75.
100 cubic foot meter, but then
Yeah.
because of altitude and this, we multiply it by 0.78.
So 100 cubic feet. It's a lot of gas. Yeah.
Any comments from the board or the audience? Let's keep rolling. 8K, discussion and possible approval of resolution supporting El Dorado Irrigation District's March 13th, 2015 stream flow variance request to help manage Caples Lake Reservoir storage in response to the ongoing extreme drought conditions in 2015.
Do you want to step past the rest of the performance report?
I'm sorry.
This is what you
I'm sorry.
call aggressive board.
Or I wonder if anyone else will notice.
Yeah, I think you skipped our line.
Please proceed, Brandon.
I will be brief.
But for the record, I've already read that one.
Gotcha. Moving on to water, you can see that we have a production of 1.3 million gallons versus a metered of 1 million, which is a 19% loss for the month of March. Our goal is 15%. And you'll note that the loss for the year currently stands at 16%. We have several action items here which include installing meters on district facilities. The 12,000 gallons for district facility use that you see here is an estimate. We're also hoping to move towards metering water sampling and fire hydrant testing. and continuing pressure testing of the system. And if there's no questions on that, I'll
Well,
move
just
on.
one, is 15%, I mean, since that's a sealed system, can't we have a more aggressive goal, or is that just kind of an intermediate goal?
It's really, well, one, we have older systems.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to repair and find leaks on water systems. And actually, the industry, Rick, you just attended a conference on this. Would you like to?
Yeah, sure. I attended a webinar with the Aqua group as well as the state talking about obviously the 25% water reduction state requirement that's coming. But in the course of that webinar, they made, the director of the State Water Resource Board made a comment that, generally for larger systems, 30 to 40% loss isn't uncommon. So with our direction of trying to narrow it down to 15%, that's probably a pretty good number.
So I came across an article in the Chronicle a few days ago, and I brought this for you, Michael. It talks about two things. Number one, the city of San Francisco is going after leaks, and they have a goal of 10%. They think that's a reasonable goal. And second, they're talking about some kind of an underground leak detection technology that sounds like it's new, who knows, but if there's any value in looking at that that's described there, enough to figure out what you can call it. Check that.
And their system's much older than ours.
Indeed, most of these days from 1906, so.
Yeah.
So once we nail 15%, let's get down to 10.
All right, okay. That's fine.
All right, and wastewater is the last of the performance reports. For March, you'll see a 2.2 million metered gallons at the plant, the influent meter, and the actual metered to customers is a 1 million. So this is a large loss for this month, 1.2 million, which is 53%. Our goal is 15% for this department. However, this is comparable to last April. So when we have snow melt, we have a lot of influent into the system, and that is why we believe that the loss is so high this month. We had a lower snow year, but an earlier melt than last year, so we're expecting a couple of months of high inflow to be reduced after that. We do have some action items to investigate the infiltration with possible temperature and flow test, and to continue the video inspections that were started, which is in compliance with the water discharge requirements. Also, we're looking at upgrading and changing the manhole covers, which allow some infiltration, starting with those in the meadow that can be underwater at times. Are there any questions on wastewater?
Any questions on performance reporting? Let's keep going.
Shall I move on to the next agenda item, which is harmonics?
Please.
Okay, I just have a very brief update here, and it's an update only. Our last report, we were moving all of the power qualities and meters around to the chairlifts and collecting data there, and we have completed this data collection with the exception of Chair 6 and the tow ropes. Chair 6, as you'll probably recall, it has a filter installed already, and the location of the filter on Chair 6 prevents the use of the power quality meters that we own that we've been moving around. The tow ropes have motors that are so small that we aren't terribly concerned with them. We have taken the data we've collected and forwarded it to Exponential for analysis. I'm happy to report that Vail is aware of the issue, as Casey reported earlier. They've actually been doing some independent work on their own equipment. They had a visit from Brunel, which is the manufacturer of the filters. They came out in February, and they're planning to conduct their own power quality study. So Vail has indicated that they will share the results of both of these visits with us. So our action items on power quality is once we get the Exponential report analysis back, we would like to share that with Vail and work with them on a draft plan for compliance with the 5% harmonic distortion limit. And we're also planning to install permanently our 3 power quality meters on each of the 3 feeders so that we can get a long-term picture of power quality in the valley. We need to identify good locations for each of these meters and come up with a plan with Jill to make sure that that doesn't disrupt billing for those 3 locations. And that concludes my report on harmonics and power quality.
Good slow progress collectively. Any questions, comments from the board or the audience?
Is there any way we're going to be able to get at what Tier 6's characteristics are? And I would ask as much because of the hypothesis that what they've done there should yield a good result, and you want to know if it does in fact yield a good result, so that they implemented a similar fix on other pieces of equipment we know in advance and we're going to be happy with the outcome.
We're still working on this. At this time, we don't have an easy way to do that, but we are still working in conjunction with Vail to try to get that information.
So if Vail went and implemented filtering on another lift, would it have the same problem that we would then be unable to test the result after the fix?
I do not believe so. The problem with Chair 6 is the current transformers that measure the power usage for our meter are on the wrong side of the filter. So any future installations, we would be able to look at and make sure that they were installed in the correct location.
So we wouldn't allow an installation of the filter on the wrong side of the transformer again.
Great. Any other questions? Brandy, I think we've covered all of your stuff. So now we'll move on to 8K. Michael.
Caples Lake is operated by PG&E under Decision 1635 of the State Water Resources Control Board. It's part of Project 184, which is a FERC project. PG&E operates the discharge from the lake, which is mandated by downstream needs, including consumptive, wildlife habitat, such as the yellow-legged frog habitat, and recreational, the level of the lake itself. Due to extreme drought and lack of any snow melt, if the mandated discharges are followed, the lake level would be in jeopardy. Table 1 on page 113 in your packet shows the results showing that the boating season for this year is in jeopardy. We need a acre feet of 8,000 feet or more to allow access to the boat ramps, and that the actual lake drawdown would be down to 398 acre feet in November if they continue to discharge the amounts that are forecasted in the March 13th report. To combat this, EID has submitted a stream flow variance request to FERC, the United States Forest Service, the State Board, et cetera, to allow a modified drawdown. If this stream plan was approved, Caples would stay between 10,000 and 14,000 acre feet over the summer to allow for the boating season, and would be at 8,000 feet at November. In support of this request, before the board is Resolution 15-03 endorsing the stream flow variance that EID has put forth. I should mention that the recent snows has improved their forecast over previous, but still the stream flow variance request is very important to allow adequate water to remain in the lake, to allow for a boating season, to allow for snowmaking next year if it's needed. This is a picture of when Caples Lake was drained to fix the dam, and I think, or the valve in the dam. I think we all remember that. So staff recommends approval of Resolution 1503 endorsing the stream flow variance request of EID.
Seems like a no-brainer.
Well, so what are the downstream negative effects of our keeping the water?
Well, I think they meet, with the stream flow variance request, it meets all consumptive flows that are needed. I'm not particularly, I don't know exactly what if there is any negative effects besides lack of water, probably recreational usage on the Caples Creek itself, which flows into the falls.
Okay. So the answer is we don't know.
Yeah, so, because that was kind of what the thought that came to my mind is, what is the negative press that could come out of this for us doing this? I support the idea, but it's, having somebody downstream, so to speak, turn that around and go,
Well, the information that was provided, I believe, says that the minimum required for endangered wildlife is
still met.
is adequate.
Okay.
I assume it probably mostly affects the hydroelectric, but I don't know.
Yeah, I would assume that would be the biggest impact is the hydroelectric gains, which are minimal
In that creek, yeah.
in that creek.
My only request, I'm prepared to support, I assume their analysis is good, I'm prepared to support, I would just like to confirm the negative effects of it, because they must have analyzed that.
yeah, I'd like to know what the talking points are in our favor.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Ron Hames, Board of Supervisors, Alpine County. There's actually agreement, many of you remember the long-term people have been there, there was agreement when the water was agreed to a certain level, and the county was part of that contentious agreement. And I think they have a requirement that they have to leave it at a certain elevation for a certain date until, I think it's August, and that is the minimum that we'll allow. It doesn't drop it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 1503, where the PUD would endorse the El Dorado Irrigation District's March 13, 2015 stream flow variance request for Caples Lake Reservoir.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So 9I, discussion and possible approval of Resolution 1502, continuing the Kirkwood Meadow Public Utility District's Water Alert System Stage 2 due to current drought conditions. Manager Sharp.
The governor has issued an executive order directing the State Water Resources Control Board to mandate mandatory water usage restrictions to achieve a statewide 25% reduction in potable urban water usage. You'll notice I emphasize the word urban. For a small water producer like the district, we're not urban, but we are under the mandate to restrict by 20% of our water usage and to restrict outdoor water usage to 2 times a week. But unlike urban areas, current regulations don't make us reportable. We don't have to report our results. This is a best faith effort. There's new regulations coming out which will update this. The water use restrictions, small water providers will now be required to actually reduce water consumption by 25% for the period of June through November as compared to the previous 2013 June through November period. We also will be required to monitor and report our water reductions, our water usage, and therefore the water reductions, and efforts that we have made to make those reductions. The enforcement, the compliance assessment is how we report those and how our measurable impacts are based on the comparison. Enforcement, if a supplier fails to comply, it can be pursue enforcement through warning letters, issuance of a cease and desist order, assessment of administrative fines up to $10,000 per day. I think that kind of covers the state water restrictions. I think one of the issues is how our neighbors have done, and as you can see, it's a mixed bag of how, in last year, how our neighbors have achieved that reduction of up to 20 to 25%, with EID actually coming in quite high. The district's current status, as you know, we measure our water through well 4 aquifer level. And our aquifer level is at 128 feet above the pump, which is very good. It was in the last fall, it was in the 140s. It dropped to about 99 over the Christmas, but it has recharged. There is a question with the drought on the status of well number 2, if it will survive the summer. I have been here long enough, so I've seen droughts where well number 2 has actually dried up, and that well has not been available to us, and we've survived through with wells 3, 4, and 5. The dangers with well 2 isn't so much the water produced in the summer, it's bringing it back. As I say, I'm sure some of the board members will remember the efforts that we have made in the past. Once it's gone dry, once it fills back up, we have to basically get a cleaning team out there to redevelop the well to make sure that it produces potable water. Last year, the district instituted a Stage 2 water alert. Stage 2 water alert is primarily has to do with water irrigation, and it limited. You'll remember that we used to have it twice a week, and we specified the days of the week, and there was concern over that. So we went to it 2 times a week, 45 minutes per zone, between 8 p.m. and 10 a.m. Watering schedule. Now, there's also restrictions about filling up swimming pools without covers, use of ornamental fountains without a recycling process, the use of water on new construction, always to use a turn-off device when you're using a handheld device when you're washing impervious surfaces or washing vehicles. So those restrictions actually were last year, and we had very positive results and good community participation. So how are we going to make a 25% reduction in that period? Well, we're kind of lucky in the fact that in 2013 we had a high usage in June through September. We had the Out Valley project going on, which used a substantial amount of money, our water, and there wasn't a big community effort to reduce water and irrigation. So between 2013 and 14, we actually reduced our consumption by 1 million gallons just in irrigation alone. So my preliminary look at this, without reducing commercial or residential usage, which we hope that those usages are up, and we have a lot of business in Kirkwood, is that we can meet these reductions just in reductions in irrigation and construction usage, which we anticipate anyway. So staff has several recommendations. One is, of course, to pass a continuance of resolution of the water stage alert into this year and continue it as far as presented as resolution 1502, and that's just a continuance of the current water stage alert number 2. But we'd also ask that staff be directed to look at the water stage alert and see if there's ways in that we can better describe conservation measures and mandate conservation measures in that and bring it back to the board and the operating committee for consideration in the future, such as the washing of impervious surfaces, the amount of time that is allowed per zone. But that's just an action item for staff. Also, I think we need to do a public awareness campaign and continue our public awareness campaign on the need to conserve water. Even though our water position looks very high, we need to show the state that we are proactive in reducing water and meeting that criteria. And I would also further state that the district itself should be very cautious of our water usage, such as not having a water fountain at the playground. It sounds like a dramatic issue, but this is an education basis and it's an emphasis. Once a week watering of public lands, which are landscaped. We have public lands in certain areas that we could go to a reduced level. I think you might be aware that the state won't be watering their medians along the highways, et cetera. Washing of vehicles only on a safety needed basis to ensure that they're safe operation, and limiting water usage in flushing, collection systems, et cetera, and then really taking a look at our fire hydrant usage the flushing of our fire hydrants and the use of that water as well. So it's kind of a four-step approach, and district staff recommends the approval by motion of Resolution 1502 and the consensus that staff is moving in the right direction.
The committee reviewed this and recommends approving Resolution 15-2, and I move that we reapprove it.
Okay, and the committee recommends
Yes.
consensus on this direction?
Yes.
Does fixing the water leaks contribute to this goal?
Sure.
You haven't enumerated it there, but it seems like it's one of the larger opportunities.
Yeah, one of the things on water leaks would be to do static testing on low occupancy periods to try to find, you know.
Right.
So-
Actually, that's a good question. Is the reduction based on what's metered at the wells or what's metered at the points of consumption?
It's metered water. It does not take into account the loss,
So fixing the leak doesn't help you in this case.
unless it's on the other side of the meter.
Was that motion second?
No.
Oh, I'll second the motion and also endorse the action items that Michael's discussed about revising the content of stage 2.
If successful, then we'll have less revenue.
That's the dilemma, isn't it?
That's the trade-off.
And I just think we need the model whether the rates become unprofitable. I mean, usually, right, bad things happen when you cut usage and then you have to fix the rates.
And then people cut back even further, which is what's going on now
Yeah.
in a lot of homes right now.
Any comments, questions from the audience? Okay, well, let's vote on approval of Resolution 1502. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Moving on to 8M. And so actually, that's both the motion passes and you have the consensus. 8M is discussion and possible action related to the district's efforts related to the Caples Lake water rights application with the State Water Board and the Department of Public Health. This is an update.
After the last meeting, the staff's next steps were to initiate discussions with the Department of Public Health with regards to the drilling of test wells and also the location of possible water storage. And also, now that the project description has been approved for distribution, to distribute that to the shareholders in the areas and ask for meetings with those shareholders to discuss, to try to flush out any issues. In the meantime, the attorney for Vail Resorts, Dan Kelly, has contacted the district to discuss an alternate surface water right approach for the district. Vail holds 2 water right permits to divert water from Caples Lake for snowmaking purposes. They have used one, but the other one has basically sat idle. Vail is interested in transferring or signing that right to the district. The district use of this permit would require several actions and several expenses, including an extension of time to put the water to a reasonable and beneficial use, the change of the purpose from a snowmaking to a domestic water use, and the domestic and possibly the modification of the season when that water could be used, rather than currently I think it's a November through March, and we would like it rather year-round or at least extended. The district is in a peculiar situation. On one hand, we're looking for water for the future, but we are in the 4th year of a drought, and we have to limit our expenses in every means. Does this assignment of an existing water right enhance the district's position enough to justify any expense, and does it accelerate the need to expend funds in the process, or does it justify that? So we went to our water rights engineer and asked him to review this possibility, and he's putting together a memo to detail his feelings on this assignment. Currently, he's not real enthusiastic with the Vail Resorts alternative. The biggest concern is that the priority date of the Vail's permit is 1995, which is far inferior to the 1927 date that the district would have assigned if we went after our own water rights. Water rights in California is a first come, first served basis, and a 1995 date is much less superior or attractive than a 1927 date, which we would have very few people that would have rights before us. In addition, the state filing is for a year-round diversion, while the assignment would be for a limited period diversion. Filing fees for the Vail option would probably be around $3,000, while the filing fee for our own would be around $10,000, which is not minimal, but still it's not as huge of a savings as we might have thought. Beyond that, the processing costs would still require a CQUIC document to be prepared. There would still be a petitions, public comment period, so there isn't a whole lot of change after that. Once the memo is finalized, I will present it to the planning committee and the board so that you can make the final decision on whether to pursue this assignment of the water rights or pursue our previous direction. I have delayed moving forward on the distribution of the project description until we get this issue finalized so that we actually come to with one project description and then not revise it. So this was discussed in the planning committee. I don't know if the planning committee has any comments.
No, I think you've covered the situation with the water rights quite completely, but there are other things that we're working on simultaneously. The attempt to define a water tank location and see if there is funding available for creating one. That seems like it has a lot of leverage to everybody at the planning committee, so we're kind of pumping that up in the stack, if you will, as a way to cover ourselves for at least, as I understand it, some 10 years, just by building a good-sized tank and having it operational. So,
Any questions from the rest of the board or the audience on this? Okay, we'll move on to 8N, discussion of possible action regarding the proposal to change the district's snow removal services operation into a property-related service. So this will include snow removal financials and community outreach/survey.
So at the after the public hearing that we held at the last meeting, the board developed a snow removal standing committee for this subject, and this committee met, chaired by Bob Epstein. Eric is on the committee, Nancy's on the committee. We also have John Weehan from Paradise Properties, George Stahl from KPS, and Tracy
Tony.
from East Meadows on this committee. One of the things that we're asked is to develop the top reasons in favor of the concepts and the top reasons that community members might be in favor of going with the individual contract system. So here we show what was developed as far as in favor of the system. Planning ahead for capital improvements for the board gives us the ability to plan ahead for the purchase of blowers. It reduces the overall expense for the homeowners associations. There should be admin and operational efficiencies resulting in the savings passed on to the customers. There is a possibility, in fact it was confirmed, that the district could charge capital connection fees, including employee housing costs, to new developers as they came in for this service. And it secures the district services and equipment for the community in the future. So those were the top 5 reasons for, and the top 5 reasons to stay in the exact, in the contract mode, that the HOAs lose the bargaining power, the competition issue for pricing and services. This continues the HOA's freedom to allocate costs uniformly per members or their governing documents. There's a risk that the district would face in large snow years. If we set the rates too low and we had large snow years, we would have to cover those costs until we went through, again, the Proposition 218 process. One of the questions that was raised at the committee level is the disconnect between water and snow removal as far as raising of rates. In water, we just have to hold a public hearing and we can raise rates through the process. But in snow removal, it looked like we had to hold an election. Actually, it is true. We would have to hold another election to raise rates in snow removal. It's an exception for water and wastewater that we fall under, that we don't have to. But Proposition 218 does call for an election, except for the water and wastewater properties. Difficult to change the arrangements once it's implemented. I just mentioned that. And can the 10% increase in efficiency actually be achieved? That's a number that we've just kind of chosen. Can we actually achieve those efficiencies over the long term by having the entire community under one contract? One of the requests was just to compare financials between a low snowfall year and a large snowfall year. And I chose 2015, which right now is projected to be a low snowfall year. We'll have to see. And then 2010-11. And I just put some variable costs in here, not the administrative costs, but what I would consider variable. And salary and benefits, you can see an increase dramatically with understandably, Peter Dornberg's mention of diesel costs. You're absolutely correct. They go up dramatically with a large snow year, as shown. Operation and maintenance goes up. So in comparative years on variable costs, you're looking at about $125,000 difference. So the snow removal recommendation from the staff was to continue our research. This was from the committee, to develop a narrative to the community, answering questions, describing what was learned, and distribute that in June. And then to develop a survey to gauge the community's direction and produce this after the homeowner association meetings. So that ends my report, and I'd open up to comments from the committee and Chair Epstein.
Well, first of all, I'd say that people rose to the occasion and they put in a lot of time. They had to fill out their questions and stuff in advance, and everybody did it. And I thought the representation was really excellent. So, so that worked out really well. In my mind, after hearing everything, a couple of overall comments. One is there's a lot of misunderstanding, misconceptions. People fill in their own data on how it currently works. And so we first have to make sure people really understand how it currently works. And I think that helps a lot. Without that, you're working against people's assumptions, and one of the assumptions was one member's is everybody can negotiate, there's no consistency among the HOAs that, whoever negotiates the best deal with us gets a better rate or, things like that. That was one example. But then the other thing that occurred to me is we're asking the wrong question. And I think the right question to ask is there any possibility that there's anybody besides us who can provide snow removal services at high quality at a competitive price? And if the answer is there really isn't anybody, then how do we do it? Because these assumptions on the benefits presuppose that there's somebody else who wants to come in and compete with us. And so we did get a list. Tony provided a list of people that might possibly be able to do it. There's a list of 8 people from the past and whatever. And one possible path to take is to go and say, can we find a competitor? Because, if we actually had a competitor, I'd rather not do this. Because if somebody can do it better and cheaper, I'm happy to exit the business, right? And I think the reason we're in this is because that just doesn't seem to be true. And I think the major reason why is to do this well, you can't just have people live somewhere else and come in when it snows. They have to pretty much, to do the quality, you have to be on site, which means they need housing for those people. They need something to do when it's not snowing. They need space for all their equipment.
And repair facility.
And repair facility. And we're the only place that can amortize that across everything else. They also need to make a profit. We just need to cover our costs. And then there's the question whether a public agency can be as efficient as a private enterprise. And let's say the answer is no, but how much more inefficient do we have to be to make all the things work out? So I think the right question is there any way to get a competitor in here? And if there isn't, then how should we organize? Because I think that's the fundamental question. So that's one point I'd raise that I didn't even really think about till after this meeting, which is really great. The second question that comes up is there an alternative? And we really came up with two. One would be to say, let's do this and just have it expire after N years. If people don't like it, it automatically reverts back. It takes a vote of the property owners, put it back. So that's kind of a way of putting a contingency on it. The other was, a lot of people are interested in the idea of what would happen if we went to multi-year contracts. And I think we should explore it, but the problem is if everybody doesn't sign up, we can't charge it. If somebody says, I'm willing to sign up for 5 years, we'll say, well, we can't say, well, you'll get a savings, because one person signing up for 5 years, as an example, doesn't have any savings to us at all. But there is kind of this idea of exploring, could we do multi-year instead of one-year contracts? But I can tell you, I don't know how we could say the price is different. I don't know if we would want to. If we don't have everybody doing it, I don't know how to manage that. So those would be the other personal observations I picked up from the meeting.
Yeah, and a couple of other observations. One is, I don't think we're defining the problem we're trying to solve very well. We haven't communicated it. Because what a lot of people think is everything from a power grab to solving our cash flow problem, when it's just the opposite. And the other is the assumption, I think, that even if there's no competition, we'll always price to our costs. And there is no requirement, if we're on a contract basis, that we have to price to our costs. We can price in a margin that builds a reserve to cover contingencies and so on. So, I think what we're trying to solve is two things. One is to match long-term investments with long-term customers. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that this is one of several opportunities we have in our services to try to reduce rates, which is part of our rate strategy.
Right.
I mean, those are the problems we're trying to solve, but I don't think people understand that.
Yeah, and we didn't really, in organizing our material, we didn't really lay it out as these things. I mean, I have a better idea now about how to explain things than I did prior to this meeting.
My other observation is that the communications committee disbanded a little early, given this and the
Well, the
other
planning
things we've
committee, I
talked
thought
about.
we'd just pick it right up, so that's a matter of conjecture. And Nancy, since you also attended, I was wondering if you had other...
No, I think both you and, it's really all been covered, because for my representation of KMA, I didn't just bring what I thought. I surveyed a bunch of different people, sent out an email and asked the questions, and I was surprised at what I got back. And I reflected that in the information that came back.
And briefly, what did you get back?
It's working. Why change it? It's a power grab. It's it's the information that isn't out there. It's what you just talked about, and I think it goes back to what I said earlier. It was like, slow the process down so the community can catch up with where you want to go.
Yeah.
And so my recommendation is, I don't think we set a time for the group to come back, but I would strongly recommend we come back together as a group, share this information perhaps before the July meeting, so that we can then become the spokespeople for this information, getting it back out there.
I agree. And we do have the list of all the questions that were surveyed, so it might be useful to circulate that to the board, and that would give you an idea of just how much conspiracy theory can exist even in a little community like ours. So,
Yeah, there's a lot.
just don't take it personally. It wasn't intended that way.
Any other questions, comments from the audience, the remaining audience?
But I think if we do decide this is something the community really wants to do, we have enough time to sort of do it in a time period that the HOAs can plan for it. I mean, if this happened in the fall and we had things resolved, before the next ski season, my impression, and I'd ask you to confirm that, is that would give ample time to sort of transition for the next year. There's no way to do it in this.
The one other thing, and sort of going out to see if there is competition, or if anybody wants to come in, is a good thought.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that we ought to outline some options that we as a district think is financially responsible in providing good service, as well as providing good service to the community. And I don't think the one-year contract is a financially responsible option. I mean, we'll do it for another year, but I'm not sure it is. So I think we should have some discussion about that and outline what the options that we think are realistic and what the cost differences or the pricing differences would be to reflect who's taking on the risk. I mean, those residents who think that everything's working fine, it's true. It's working fine for them because they're taking on none of the financial risk as individuals. They are as part of the community, because in the end, people are going to pay for things that we incur, but it'll just be through different methods.
Yeah.
So the status quo is capital expenditure risk or capital asset risk, but no rate risk, because we can adjust every year. The possible services is less capital risk, but a lot of rate risk, right? If we have a big winter.
Yeah, well, if we have a big winter following a low winter, it'll take at least a year to catch up with our...
So why isn't a 3-year contract, just to pick a number, the worst of both worlds? In other words, we really don't have long-term planning capability. We're locked into short-term rate risk. I'm just asking.
I think it's the right question. I don't think we necessarily debate it now, but I think it's a good thing for us to go through and say, if we did these various things, how does that work out? Because right now we're not demonstrating any alternative. And so I think we would reach the conclusion you just gave, but I think it's a good exercise nonetheless to try to do that.
Right.
To say, under a contract renewal basis, different contract terms is the variability.
I'm just saying, in answer to Standish, though, is under a contract term, I don't think we should be pricing to our costs.
No, we'd have to build in.
And that's how we would mitigate that risk.
Yeah, we could go to
So
multi-year, more expensive
So
contracts.
HOAs would reserve the ability to can us after 3 years, and we would get sufficient funds to be sure that we're mitigating the risk of having invested in people and assets.
Where under 218, that would be illegal for us to do that.
Yeah, 218, we can't do that.
Right.
So are you saying we should go out and resurrect the Dale Rises of the world and the...
Well, that was, I mean, I don't know what we should do about that. We
Yeah,
have
I don't know.
we have the names. Dale Rising is one of the names on the list that came back.
Well,
the guys who quit, right?
Yeah, Alpine was on it.
They all have. I mean, one thing we could do is go to them and say, these are our costs, and this is how we calculate things. Do you believe you could compete? Because we're about to make it, illegal for you to, and we don't want to do that. If you think you can come in here and offer better, it'd be interesting to hear what they say, and ask them, say, where would you save money over? I mean, they can have cheaper labor, or what? I don't. They'll save money by having people out of the area and come in right before it snows. It's an interesting question to ask, because there's this assumption that there's a competitor out there that we're going to block.
Yes, Nancy.
So to come, so here we are, using KMA as an example, we're getting ready to adopt our budget next weekend. That's what we have to do.
Sure.
So we're already, you know, we're already thinking about, okay, so what is our snow removal cost going to be for next year? Are you going to build in any of these things that you're talking about, you know, or are you going to, you know, respect what's gone on in the past is, you know, you've always
No, I
given
think
back the
that-
credit.
I think we've talked, I mean, I don't think it's been an official decision, but I think we've talked about that for this coming year, it's business as usual.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we got to go through this process and resolve what direction we
Yeah.
want to go in.
But there's two answers to your question. One is we're probably going to just do what we've done always. But the other answer to your question is we can do whatever we want.
Right.
And there's no competitor because it's a one-year contract. So
Right.
it's just the fact that we're wonderfully nice people with a great manager that you don't have to worry about it. But you
Right,
should be
but-
worried.
And we're elected.
You should be really worried.
But in a sense, I am, because,
Right.
you know, and maybe I understand a little bit too much, but it's just like, you
Yeah.
know, yeah. So, okay, I think I
Right.
know where we're going.
Yeah, you'd be less worried under the other
Right.
scenario because it require a vote of the public
Right.
to change it.
My opinion is that going out to the former service providers might be an okay PR or communication move. But my sense is that most people that I talk to are happy with the PUD as the service provider. They just look at this change in terms as, you know, a conspiracy.
Yes, I agree.
So I'm not sure it makes sense to go out and gin up Dale Rise, for example, who I had the pleasure of dealing with. He's a great guy, and his wife Donna. But, and you know, there'll be more conspiracy theories. I mean, if you go to people like that, they'll say, why is the PUD coming to me to ask me to compete with them? And I can see people in the valley saying, yeah, the PUD went and ginned up the competitor, but the PUD wanted the business, and so more conspiracy theory. So I don't know
I
if we
put
should
in the
do that.
passive tense, I'm not implying that I would do it, but
Staff has a definite opinion on this. I think you can guess what staff's opinion is.
Well, why don't you elaborate so that we don't have a conspiracy theory about what you're thinking?
Well, I lived through the Dale Rise days, and I lived through the Alpine Smith days, and dealing with that whole issue has been a lot of work for staff. And I agree on the, you know, on the overall 30,000 foot level, but when you're in the trenches shoveling, it's really hard to have two operating systems in the valley.
So what are you looking for here? This is just an update. I like
Yeah.
the plan, by the way. I think the plan that you've come up with to refine the communications, communicate this to the community, both in a written form, maybe with better narrative,
Right.
and some meetings around July 4th, and then follow up with a survey, is absolutely the right way to go.
Information tape with the barbecue.
I think more we'd focus, because a lot of this is centered around, people trust the HOAs to say, what do you think? If all the HOAs say, we'd be better off into this than the other, that's an important statement. If some of them are saying, I think we're better off this way, I think understanding that. So in some sense, doing it through the HOAs. Because the driveway plowing thing isn't really the driver on this.
What do you mean by that?
It isn't the 61 driveway contracts.
Right.
That's the real driver on this, yes or no. It's really the relationship with the HOAs and that. So I think working through them is probably more valuable than, we could do an information table on that. And then having one of the HOAs contact some people and say, you know, I'm about to lose my ability to negotiate, were you about to come in here? That would be interesting data, because they're the ones who would actually go out and solicit a contract. So
Yeah.
if we could find a volunteer to do that, it would be useful data. And if we can't, then it sounds like Michael is not volunteering.
No.
Yeah, unfortunately, not gonna go.
And I wasn't going to ask him either.
Ron?
Yeah.
Ron Hames, Alpine County. Having been here during the 80s, it's become quite easy to become complacent of where the snow goes here. At one point, they were talking about bringing in burners to melt the snow back in the early 80s, where to put the snow.
That'd be a
There's really that
high-class
kind of
problem.
problems they had.
Yeah.
And you guys don't have that kind of problem. And it's really easy to look at it from one HO problem to not look at how and where do they put the snow. And that's really become a problem in the latter part of the years that you guys have. You have to have locations.
Right.
And it's really easy to look at it from the perspective of have someone come in here and do it. Having been on the other end of that business, it's not impossible, but it's almost impossible to get here in timely to do it. And then when you're trying to clean it up, you have everybody in the way who try to move, and it's just gonna be a nightmare. And the other alternative is the PUD. I mean, you could talk to Caltrans, you could talk to Vail to go back into that, but again, when you have other agencies doing it, you don't have the control. And it's really gonna be prudent for you and your homeowners that are up here that it's public safety, and that's what the bottom line is. So,
Thanks. Did you have something to say, Michael?
Yeah, we have a comment from the web. A customer has commented that outside vendors need housing and a place to keep the equipment. And in Kirkwood and Vail, as I recall, would not let them use the vehicle maintenance law. So just want to put that into the record.
That's a good point.
Okay.
Actually, they did let Alpine Smith use it, and they still couldn't make a go.
Okay.
Just for.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And KMA will not be, I'm assuming that the board, our board would not support the idea that we're going to go out and ask somebody else, because we've done it in the past. We were the organization that came to the district originally and wanted snow removal, and we've been satisfied with it, so you can count on us out.
Okay.
Good to know.
Alan, your homeowners association, can you go do that?
No, thank you. I'm really pleased with the PUD. But I just wanted to ask a question regarding one of Michael's unfavorable top 5. The issue about setting rates with Proposition 218, I'm certainly not an expert in 218, but if we set rates, to Eric's point, both high enough and flexible enough on the front end, why would we have to go back? Is there some way we can tie this to hours or snowfall or something that gives our rate structure a flexibility that we could live with it?
Have it adjust automatically instead of having
Yeah.
to have an election to adjust it.
Yep.
To my understanding, no. It's an excellent question, however, and I'll rephrase it or reinvestigate that. But from my understanding is that if you set your rates high enough, there is no flexibility except you can go down. So you can refund off of, you can set your rates here, but you can charge less if you have a less year. But if you have a big year and you've set your rates too long, you have to go back through an election to raise those rates. So yes, I think you can definitely tie your rates into measurements of snowfall, number of hours, et cetera, as long as your initial rate, your ceiling rate, is set. Because the only way that you can increase that ceiling rate is through CPI increases, and or a vote of the public.
So we couldn't set a rate per inch of snowfall?
You could set a rate at $100, but it's based on an inch of snowfall. But once you hit that 100, you're capped.
But so if we got $100 per inch of snowfall and we had 2 inches of snowfall, we could charge $200? That doesn't work?
If your cap is at 200, yes.
You have to.
You have to have a cap?
You have to have a cap.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to have a cap, and you can't go over that without a vote of the public.
You have to have a
And
hard
that is,
number.
But it does sound like there's flexibility if we set it for a high snow year.
Yeah.
With the implicit arrangement that we refund.
Yes, and I think just 2 comments. One is, this isn't Michael's list, this is the committee's, just to clarify. I know he's just reporting it. But yeah, the idea is we'd set a rate for what we think a higher, not really fantastic, but a high snow year, and then there'd be a refund schedule based on actual costs that would apply to the following year. So we would always collect the money on a low snow year. We collect the money in advance and then move it forward. But if those calculations were wrong and we just keep falling behind, it would take a vote of the public to change it. And our backstop would be to have some contingency of property taxes available to cover the loss that would then get repaid or something like that.
Michael, why don't we have to go through the 218 process to change the electricity and propane rates? They're also
electricity and propane rates are not subject to 218.
snow removal is, water is, but water doesn't require another 218 to change the rate.
It involves process, but not the election. So what I reported was absolutely correct. There's an exception for water and wastewater.
It's interesting variation.
Yeah, I thought that, anyway.
It's all thanks to the California proposition, voter proposition. You can get all sorts of interesting propositions. asked.
So I heard from 2 homeowners associations, they like the PUD service. The issue is how it's priced and contracted for.
I think that's fair. Yes.
Is there anything else on this one, snow removal? So the consensus is we support the direction that you've just described. 9O, running out of letters. Discussion and possible action regarding Kirkwood Capital Partners planned parking lot, plan for the lot adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant in the meadow.
So Kirkwood Resort Development is proposing a parking lot to the north of the wastewater treatment plant. TriTech held a meeting yesterday with good discussion and community participation. District submitted a list of questions to TriTech. TriTech has continued the item to their next meeting, which will be held on May 8th. The continued item is to allow KRD to provide additional info, to provide a vicinity map to show the impacts of the scenic quality of the parking lot, a better description, a meets and bounds description of the parking lot, and to do an alternative analysis and justification for the parking lot. So a little bit of homework for KRD. The district will continue to be involved in the public review. We are planning to do an additional letter to TriTech prior to their meeting to put into public record to address some of the questions that were raised at the Friday meeting. And with that, possibly Eric would like to comment.
Let's see.
Right on the spot.
It's a yes or no question, just say yes.
Well, I mean, I think that the important, for me, the important thing that happened at that meeting was that alternative analysis. I mean, I think that was the key thing. And I think the other important thing that came up earlier was that Standish asked Casey to be involved in more of a community effort.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you were in the room, Michael. You might have been out, but I asked Casey if he'd participate in I don't know if it's an ad hoc or a real committee to discuss an overall plan. I think we should be involved, obviously. And then the question is whether KRD has an appetite for participating in that. I think we should ask them.
Yeah, I think Nate would be a good candidate for that, and staff would be happy to organize that committee.
Okay, and I'd suggest and ask maybe a couple members of the community, maybe you, Sandy, and you, Alan, if you're willing to serve on it, but not limited to that group of people.
What's pay?
Sorry?
It's competitive with all other committees.
Competitive with finance.
It's not that high. Nancy?
So, without any disrespect to Casey or his position with Vail, I've heard it repeated multiple times that, decisions regarding something like Kirkwood Meadows Drive or, those are really above him. So I think it's a good idea that you all pursue this, but I don't know how you get to the next level. How do you get to the people that are in Colorado? It is.
I think that's a very good point. And so maybe we should say somebody, one or more people from Vail, and probably one person from KRD, and a good number of members from the community. And, if KRD doesn't want to participate in an overall discussion, then I don't know that this committee is going to solve a lot. And I'm somewhat skeptical that they will. I think that they want 193 parking spaces out of that area because it's the last area they control, and that would release, some escrow from the acquisition that's tied to restoring parking spots from the Timber Creek area. So, but I'd love to see them come to the table. And Casey did say before I asked him that parking was a big challenge. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me based on the last couple of winters because I haven't seen us running out of parking spaces. I don't know if you have.
So I would be, happy is not the word, I'm willing to serve on this committee since I feel strongly about it, and it was very interesting this morning to hear him say that he thinks the number one issue here is parking. And to me, it almost was, we're not going to improve Kirkwood unless we get more parking. And I don't, that's the message I heard. And so I think parking is on his mind. And he also brought up Kirkwood Meadows Drive, which I think some of the people in KMA thought maybe had been dropped. So you can see it hasn't been dropped. So I think an overall plan is really important. I would not, I mean, I'm not trying to be secretive or anything, but I think that if this committee is to make any progress, they need to talk a couple times before the tri-tech meets again. And so I think it shouldn't have a lot of people on it because it's just going to be too unwieldy.
Sure.
And I agree completely with Nancy that you've used Standish. We've got to figure out a way to talk to Colorado. Casey, I mean, he says the same things
Over
In
and
every
over.
meeting.
in every meeting. Thank
And
you.
Colorado uses him as the buffer.
Yeah,
You will
yeah.
not get to Colorado. But let me just reiterate what I think I heard Casey saying this morning. He didn't say that we have an inadequate number of parking spaces. He said that the customer experience was poor because of the parking options they have today. So I think, you know, their Kirkwood Meadows Drive proposal, to me at least as a homeowner, and I live right on it, is much preferable to a lot down here on Loop Road. So what we really need to address with Vail is their perception of the customer experience and how do we make that better for their customers.
So I guess if in this discussion, you're going to add Kirkwood Meadows Drive, I would recommend that you add somebody from KMA because
Yeah.
there are significant impacts to.
That's why,
Yeah.
and I personally was thinking, that's why Jeff should do it. Jeff, not you. It's about Jeff, because, I mean, he's from KMA, he understands operations and physical locations, and he lives right there.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe Alan, Jeff, and me, and Michael could try and get these two guys to talk.
Unless two members of the KMA board see better candidates.
I'm happy with Jeff. And just to correct something that was said, I think by Sandy, KMA has not thought that this issue is in bed.
Oh.
We have the second set of plans for the remodeling of Kirkwood Meadows Drive, and they're actually posted on our website. You can all go and look at them. I think that part of Casey's reason for being at the hearing yesterday was to figure out how he was going to have to go before TriTac to change the 2001 parking plan so that it would say it's okay to park both sides of Kirkwood Meadows Drive.
Is that the plan in a nutshell?
Oh, yeah.
And the parking plan says that, and it's incorporated by reference in the specific plan. So, in my opinion, he would have to go through the same thing that Nate is going through to change the specific plan.
And the actual parking plan prepared by the engineer from Vail shows 90-degree parking, shows some other odd angles of parking. The first round showed parking in front of Chicken Feathers where the bus turnaround is, and also parking in front of Jeff and Maline's house, which was a little bit unusual because they wouldn't be able to park there themselves. And while we're on the subject of parking, I have a couple more things too. We're supposed to have 2,500 parking spaces, which we do have. We actually have about 3,000. So this push for more parking spaces doesn't really make much sense, at least with the skier border population that we're seeing currently.
Is it more parking or is it more convenient parking?
I don't
Way
know.
out Kirkwood Meadows Drive is not more convenient,
Well, I
that's
know,
for sure.
yeah.
He
And
doesn't
particularly
get-
backing out into traffic when you want to leave.
Yeah.
With everyone else trying to leave and
Yeah.
back out of traffic.
Yeah.
Only use it how many days?
He's not being clear.
Well,
I mean,
and
that's why a small group, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right, and so what's coming out, what we're learning is that even though KMA has a easement on Kirkwood Meadows Drive, and I don't know my east, my west, you know, that they, meaning Vail, Casey, has said, you know, they think they can use it forever, not just 5 days a week. So they're not
5 days a year.
5 days a year, I'm sorry, 5 days a year. So there is a disagreement about how KMA feels about what that easement says versus what Vail is. So right there, for us, it's like a non-starter. And those plans are widen it, stripe it, take down mature trees. And there had been discussions about what the speed limit was going to be. Could it be reduced? And, you know, it's just going to be just as fast, if not faster. But go to the KMA website, you know.
Sure.
You can
No, it's a great
see
source of
the-
information. Michael?
We try.
Along Alan's lines, what I heard was that the guest experience was the issue with parking, and possibly this committee could discuss an alternative to improving the existing parking to allow additional paving, actually paving parking lots and not having guests park in mud. I used to run parking, so did Rick Ansel, and one of the biggest complaints we ever heard was, one, the ineffective use of the parking that you have now, triple parking cars, parking them far apart, you know, and parking in a mud hole. You know, it's really unacceptable. So, and paving actually can be done where it enhances the environment. Look at it in South Lake Tahoe and the efforts to clear the lake. First thing you do is you get impervious surfaces over dirt, so you're not enhancing that runoff into the meadow. So this could be an environmental issue as well.
So
I just have one comment too, and it's something that Casey had mentioned earlier as well. It's just the safety aspect of emergency vehicles being able to access Perkins Drive or this proposed parking lot as well. So.
Michael made that point yesterday when he was asked on fire.
I mean, this month could go very fast. I mean, Michael's questions were excellent, but I don't think anyone's going to answer them. I mean, I don't think Nate Whaley is going to sit down and write you a letter and answer your 19 questions. And TriTech itself doesn't have the job of answering those questions. So I would just suggest that when you write your second letter to TriTech for the next meeting, that you put forth, these are your comments and these are your concerns, and this is why I don't think this parking lot should take place. You were very nice and put it in the form of questions, but I think it's time to toughen it up.
Just one of the thoughts that came to my mind as a result of that meeting was that a survey of the community that we did, not we KMPUD, but I mean we as opposed to Amador County, that tried to tease out what do people think about this as a use of land in the valley, that might be good input to the Amador supervisors when they ultimately have to consider this question. So I guess what I would ask is, does it make sense for us to try to do some sort of a resident survey? I'm not sure that falls into the KMPD purview. It seems on surface to be a little problematic, but maybe if you squint and look at it sideways, maybe it's communications, that kind of stuff, if you will.
Maybe that's something to think about after the next TriTech meeting. I think it's going to be hard to survey people because it's hard to explain. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily motivated to solve the problem.
Right. Michael?
I have a web comment. A customer has asked, Alan's point is important. It is the mud. It's the adjacency of parking to lifts. It's restrooms, food and beverage transportation, and transports to lifts.
Send that comment on to Casey.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine getting out of my car at this parking lot and walking up to Chair 7, up a steep hill with a lot of other cars parked along the side. You're competing with cars to walk up the roadway in your ski boots, and it just seems pretty ugly to me. So.
Nancy, you had a comment?
Two comments. So as far as Vale's plans for Kirkwood Meadows Drive, they popped up last year at TriTech in May of 2014. And I tried to inquire as to what the status of the plans are from the county side. And, you know, they haven't come back. They haven't necessarily, from what I'm gathering, is that they haven't been, you know, gone through whatever process they need to. But that doesn't mean that, you know, come to next month's TriTech meeting, that those plans won't come back in some form. And then, all that aside, you know, we talk about this multi-story parking structure we love down here, and I would like to think that, you know, we can bring down that barrier, but the number that has been thrown out, that's been bantied about as to what that cost is $50,000 per parking space. So I guess having that piece of information is like, okay, how can we take that information and turn it around into a positive instead of making it such a negative? You know, and to me, one of the first places to start is say, well, how much has been invested in this parking place over here? What Vale's doing down Kirkwood Meadows Drive? You know, is that the first piece of a down payment on a multi-story parking structure? I don't know. I'm not an expert.
Well, and I just have to say, I mean, after listening most of my career to developers say that things are not cost effective. I mean, I think that 50,000 a space is probably right on, but that doesn't mean we can't have the discussion with them. Casey this morning said he couldn't divulge what goes on in each resort, but he said Vail just increased their value by, was it 30%, he said this morning?
What was that? Revenues were up in the December
Revenues
quarter.
were up for Vail for 30%. So, I mean, where there's a will, there's a way.
Right.
You know, they put a lot of money into their other resorts doing things, and I think we shouldn't be deterred by the fact that a multi-level parking structure would be expensive.
And so Nancy, did version 1 of the plans go before TriTech in May of last year, and version 2, where did you find that? How did that surface?
KMA asked for them because we wanted to see where they were. We knew they were being pushed back, and you know, where were they going based upon, you know, what had happened at TriTech last year, and whether they've evolved any more, I'm not sure. I believe that, I'm not absolutely sure, but I believe KMA's agreement regarding that easement requires them to come back to us and consult. Consult doesn't mean approve, you know, I have to check in with you. And so I think they're just checking off that box.
And the date of these plans is February 2013.
So now there's a newer version out.
Well, I just went to your website since you
Oh,
recommended
okay.
it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's the latest
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was after we met with the engineer.
Oh, okay.
and they-
Yeah.
And who do you deal with on parking stuff at Vail? Not Casey?
We deal with Casey, but we understand we understand what we're dealing with.
Right. And the easement you talked about, your reading is that they're allowed to park on Kirkwood Meadows Drive
You want to?
From point A to point B,
5 days a
5
week?
days a year. And if they exceed that 2 years in a row, they are forced to build more parking.
They're forced to build more parking?
Yeah.
This is a written easement document?
It's
that you
recorded.
have?
Yes,
Yeah.
and recorded, it's all legal.
Could you get that to me?
Is the easement on the website?
I don't know if it is or not, because
Okay,
it's
yeah.
an old document.
Just get your, you know.
Okay, or
Yeah.
just email me.
And where is point A and point B?
That's a hard thing to remember right now. It's, is it Winter Creek?
But it says the agreement.
It does say the agreement from A to B, and it's not way far down, and I think it stops at Chicken Feathers and comes this way.
And I mean,
There are signs up on the trees down there that will show you where it is. There's some small white and green signs in the trees that say reserved parking.
because that's what part of the agreement says, is that parking was supposed to be
KMA
for
only.
KMA. I mean, Peter, do you have any recollection of some of this? I mean,
I do. Probably too much. But I think you're going in the right direction.
The whole,
And I'd rather you do the investigation.
the whole widening process actually started, we found, with Vail submitting a grading plan for this property with no other documents, and it was just rejected down in Hanover County. So from there, they figured they had to do something a little more.
Grading plan for Kirkwood Meadows Drive.
No, for the part of the school site.
I see. And Vail submitted that?
No, wait a minute, that's not right. That is for Kirkwood Meadows Drive. It was a grading plan.
And that would have been an administrative, just.
Approval.
Go out and do it.
And that was the most shocking thing of the whole thing first. And the way it all came about was, it was over Memorial Day weekend and all that kind of stuff. And it was like, oh my gosh, look what's on the TriTac. This is not just a grading plan. This is, Kirkwood Meadows Freeway.
So have you talked to your KMA attorney about this?
Well,
About-
and it's,
We're living with our attorney.
I mean, we've got it.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
We're not in agreement, but at the same time, we don't know.
So Derek.
Right.
Yeah, so am I. I'm living with my attorney.
We don't know where if I had to
What's his name?
guess where Dale's gonna go with this, they're just gonna go do what they wanna do, and then just wait for the repercussions. In other words, will KMA have to file a lawsuit against Vail? Because they've turned around what the easement says to make it work for them. And you can tell that what they're saying, Vail is saying, these are not Casey's words, these are Colorado
Oh,
words.
no.
It's a huge issue. Bigger than just.
Well, when I said something about writing a survey, I misspoke. What I really meant was, should we have a petition, which is easier to get, a bunch of people to sign a petition potentially than to go through a survey. If that makes any difference. Then you could have a bunch of unhappy people about the proposal, and if the list got long enough, it would have to be persuasive to political folk.
I think at this point, the best thing you can do is educate the public, because I don't think a lot of people are aware of this.
This is an education for me.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I've learned a lot of new stuff today that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah,
That I've lived through.
Oh, it's been around for.
1988.
What was the question? Or-
I just said I didn't know that they had a written document, rather than just something on a subdivision map that said KMA has the right to pass.
And we
that-
re-upped it at the end of 25 years and filed it again.
Yeah, so I'm very curious about it. Would you mind if I talk to Rebecca about it?
That's up to-
Well, let me see it first.
Okay. And where the easement came out of, I don't mean to belabor the point.
No, we appreciate it.
Is that KMA used to own Kirkwood Meadows Drive. And so whoever the original founders of the resort and, the workings there between KMA, the original, some of the early owners of KMA, and what they wanted to get accomplished on Kirkwood Meadows Drive, snow removal or, and access to their homes up on the hill there. And it's my understanding that one of the other things that came out of it that impetus behind KMA also wanting to get rid of Kirkwood Meadows Drive was the liability.
Sure.
Back then it might not seem like a big deal, but there were accidents and, and KMA is going, oh, how could we afford this?
Fascinating.
Mhm.
Michael, do you feel you have clear direction?
Let me repeat some of it. The board is authorized forming a national parking plan committee, and members of the community of volunteers, Sandy and Alan, Jeff in absence, along with Casey, KRD, I'll approach Nate and myself, and to get this moving as quickly as possible. Also, staff is going to draft a letter to TriTac with regards to the questions that we had at the last Friday's meeting and concerns that we voiced in the form of questions after the last meetings. I think that's pretty cool.
I think that's it. Do you think this is a productive thing to do or not?
Yeah, I think that the district is responsible for protecting the utility interests of the community, and we have a lot of utility interests with this lot. We're adjoining, we have fire concerns which have been voiced. So we, not as only is it a good idea, we have a fiduciary duty to do so.
And in the bigger picture, same kinds of concerns along Kirkwood Meadows Drive.
Exactly.
To my mind, looking at those, it's even worse. There's anybody's going to get out of that parking space after 2 o'clock.
Which parking space?
Any of them.
On
They're
Kirkwood
at
Drive.
right angles. You have to block both lanes of
Yeah.
traffic.
But there are parking spaces like that today
Today,
over
yeah.
here in front of Chair 7, so
Yeah, I know.
those people are getting out. I mean, I don't, it's not
Well, they
pretty, but
eventually
it's-
leave. But we're talking about, another 300.
I mean, it sounds like a terrible thing to do to me, but
Your comments are directed at the
Just
Vales,
that-
Vales parking?
The Vail parking
Okay.
proposal as of February doesn't look like, it doesn't seem rational. It seems like a last resort, so to speak, if there's no other alternative. And if this is, I park with my family here, and it's a total nuisance tracking. It's good on a snow day, it's a total nuisance in the mud. And if the problem is improving the current parking lots, and that's not factored in, then that's one role we can play, since we have a lot of control over that because they're absorption bins.
Great, well, let's move on. I'd love to see Nancy or Judy, if you can attend as a visitor, even if you're not part of the committee, or if you want to be part of the committee, or impart your knowledge to Jeff, because it's not, does Jeff know everything you know?
I don't mind attending.
Does Jeff know everything you know, and your whole homeowners association know all this, or is it really handled at the board level, or don't you want to answer the question?
We do handle a lot of stuff at the board.
Yeah.
Judy, I'll include you on all correspondence and
Thank you.
invite you to each meeting.
Thank you.
So, 9P, welcome, Rick. Discussion and possible approval of proposal to install a verbatim BSS-8C auto dialer alarm notifier to replace the existing chatterbacks. Total project expense $5,000.
Yeah, thank you. Michael asked me to give this report. As you know, we had a failure with our chatterbox, which is an auto dialer that alerts the district staff there's an issue somewhere in the plant with one of the basing levels or a pump and so forth. And in December of last year, the auto dialer, the chatterbox, which was from 1984 era, failed. And so we had Tesco controls come up, reboot power cycle the auto dialer to make it work. But the long short of it is that we think this is going to fail. The device is no longer supported by the manufacturer, and so before you is a proposal to buy a new updated version of the chatterbox, which is in the board's packet, and it's called a verbatim SS8C auto dialer, which will give us the same alarm points. In fact, it'll give us up to 16 alarms if we need it. Right now, we're only doing about 8 alarms. And within that 16, we want to also introduce a new float alarm for our main EQ, or our main basin within the wastewater treatment plant. And so, again, it's something that I think is important for the wastewater treatment operations, and so I respectfully request, staff recommends that we purchase and install this verbatim auto dialer. The district would purchase the device, and then we'd hire Tesco Controls to install it for cost not to exceed $5,000.
The committee agrees.
Any discussion? I'll make the motion to approve that. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So, 9Q, running out of letters.
you got double A. How's that double A?
Discussion and possible approval of a revision to the on-call policy for district staff. Rick, are you going to do that too?
I am, and I believe Michael's going to also chime in as well. As the board is aware, the district currently has a staff that is able to respond to emergencies after hours. Currently, we have one staff member that carries a cell phone for the electric and propane, a staff member that carries a pager for the water, sewer, and of course 2 volunteers that sign up for the fire department. Looking at operations and the way things are done, it was an inequity of pay as well as, just quite honestly, getting enough volunteers to sign up for the volunteer fire department. In the 13, 14 years that I've lived in Kirkwood or worked in Kirkwood, the way the resort operates, the number of volunteers that are available during the summer completely changed. When I first started, it was more of a seasonal or more of a year-round resort where there were a lot of younger, interested parties wanting to volunteer with the fire department, and the numbers, as you know, have been slowly dwindling over the years because the resort just doesn't have that year-round operation that they used to. And consequently, we're finding that we're only having 2 to 3 people sign up for the fire department to cover calls for our 24-hour, 7 days a week schedule. So this plan is basically developed to allow us to support the fire department with other district staff, and also to make the existing on-call pay a little bit more uniform, where we would pay to have 1 district staff member who would be qualified and safely able to respond to emergencies for electric, water, propane, as well as fire department within the Kirkwood Valley, so we could have more of these paid staff, qualified staff, to help in the need of an emergency. So before you is the information to change the existing on-call schedule to essentially eliminate one of the fire department volunteer slots, which if you looked at my on-call schedule downstairs, I generally have only 1 person signed up for fire 24/7. And thankfully, it's one of the Trevette brothers, one of our captains and assistant chief, that's put their name down. But I'd like to backfill with another district employee, whether it's the field manager, Dave Waddle, Ed Benson with electric and propane, who's also volunteered for the fire department, and other key staff that we've been cross-trained to help us out in the event of emergency. As you remember at the Mountain Club, when we have an emergency that's usually fire-related, it's not 1 person responding. We really need everybody, and 9 out of 10 times we're calling the electric and propane person to come out and help, or the water person to come out to shut water off. So really, it's just enhancing the service that the district can provide, and to hopefully help offset the cost by eliminating one of the volunteer slots. I'm able to pay this on-call person $25 to put their name on the list, as well as the flip side is if I do call a person out, we're going to also pay them the 2-hour show-up on-call fee as well. So financially, it may not be the perfect solution, but I think it's imperative, or it's a vital need for the fire department as well as for all district services to do this. So again, I kind of paraphrased the report that is in the board packet, but staff recommends the implementation and revised on-call system for a 3-month trial period. And then after 3 months, this issue would be brought back through the personnel committee as well as to the board to review the operational and financial impact for the board's consideration.
And the Personnel Committee has considered this a couple of times, and we recommend approval. Any questions or discussion on this? Yes, Rob?
I know it's really a problem here to get people to be on the fire department, because just for a long period of time, I think you and maybe one other person's been over 4 years. Everybody else has never made it that long in my history here. Is there some way to mix this in that the district staff becomes your fire department? Is that, I mean, that's what you're heading here right down that road. They're the only people that live here year-round and are here usually 24/7 for other reasons as well. The rest of the public that lives here doesn't stay.
Correct.
We have, I mean, it just is a transient population, and you need that consistency, and your fire department goes outside of Kirkwood. I think you come all the way to Red Lake, or is it Carson Pass?
Generally, it's Carson Pass toward Alpine County, and then the top of Tragedy Springs on the other side of Silver Lake, heading west with our agreement with Alpine County Fire Protection District.
So currently, you only have the 1 person, and you're relying on, I imagine, Lake Tahoe?
Eastern Alpine County and Alpine, which also has the mutual aid agreement with Lake Valley.
But Lake Valley will be there long before the people at Woodward's will be here.
Yeah, they're paid department, they're at the station.
Right,
More than
right, right.
likely, they'll.
And they're actually closer.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so from the perspective of that, now, the other side, you don't expect any help, I assume, in a timely manner, correct?
In the wintertime, if both passes are closed, I don't get any help.
Right,
But
right. And you're on,
in
you're
the
on island,
summer,
you're asking for the patrol to help you, isn't that right?
On some occasions, it's very rare that we'll bring Kirkwood Ski Patrol in unless it's a search and rescue or another county activity that's larger than we can handle. But for the west side, in the summer, we'll have CAL FIRE and U.S. Forest Service usually doing work within Silver Lake, Dewdrop, up country. But the response time from Pine Grove, if their unit's committed, it's an extended ETA. It could be 45 minutes an hour before we have help.
So it's not the golden hour?
No.
Which, those who don't know, the golden hour is the time that your life expectancy goes down 50% if you don't get to medical care within an hour. So that's what that golden hour is. Iron Mountain Road is open right now, or most of you know it now, it's Mormon Immigrant Trail. Most of us remember the old name. I'm trying to get that to be part of our emergency, because that's actually faster than it would be from Pine Grove, from them to bring up to Slide Park from that direction.
It would be, yeah.
I'm trying to figure if we have a mass casualty here, how do we solve this? And I think you're part of the drill that's coming up. We're going to have.
You're familiar with it, yeah.
And that's one of the things I want to talk about is bringing them up from the west side during that time when Iron Mountain Road could be cleared or is cleared.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so this is a big issue, I think, throughout the county, knowing that you have a lower staff. I really support this idea because you have a lot of people who have passed on in your vacation homes here and your vacationers that come up to elevation, and these guys are the ones that are responding. And we need them to be trained and very well qualified to be there and be there timely. And I highly support this.
As a supervisor of Alpine County, do you think there'd be any funding available from Alpine County for us to develop this capability?
The fire department is working with a bunch of different ways right now because like he spoke out that we get the Lake Valley to come in between, and Lake Valley's had some challenges. I don't know if you're aware of the dynamic of the fire department in South Lake Tahoe.
No, not.
Go to the press, you'll find all kinds of stuff. But they lost a vote for them to support their fire department in the last election. And that's going to have some ramifications. And El Dorado County is questioning what they're going to be doing as well. So there's a big picture being brought on here. And so this is part of it. Alpine County bringing funds up here to Kirkwood, I don't know. We're arguing about whether we're going to do snow removal, let alone have a crew. So that's another argument. But I highly support the idea of it. How can we do it? I don't know. And I'd well like to work with you to get something up here to do that. His response, I'm sure Terry Hughes is talking to you all the time about whatever we can do. And Terry Hughes is our fire camp captain of the east side. And then Rick Stevens is our sheriff, who is also the fire chief for Bear Valley. So you have three very qualified fire chiefs to have this discussion. All of them challenged by geographics, where they're connected. And most of our connections actually through Douglas County on the east side. And that's where your backup really will come from.
And we appreciate the support from Alpine County with the donation of the command vehicles, the 2 expeditions. I understand that the Sheriff's Department had 4 more vehicles approved.
Was it 4 or 2?
Or 2.
Yeah.
Then if there are more vehicles in the fleet that are able to be donated to the district, again, we would appreciate that, or any other equipment. But financially, that's where our need is. Obviously, you get what you pay for, especially with the volunteer fire department. I know that Woodford's or Eastern Alpine County does stipend their volunteers to come to trainings and drills and so forth. And so
I think only after a certain amount of time,
right.
3 times a month after hours, they get $100 or $150. I'm not sure what the number is, but
yeah,
to some point they get compensated to a little bit.
but that incentive does make a difference, or I think it helps. It definitely, if we didn't have the incentive for our volunteers, I would question whether we have volunteers. So,
Well, I remember a long time ago you didn't.
correct.
Yes, Nancy.
So having two sons that are involved with the fire department, and I can think back to when Mountain Club Fire transpired, and both my sons responded to that, and thinking it was going to be a burnt toast call. Burnt toast means, you don't decide, oh, is it burnt toast or is it a real fire? And they get down there and it's like, oh fudge, it's a big fire. So knowing that there would be more bodies to be able to respond is a great thing. And then I can also say that the work that the district has been doing with the existing staff to train them to go out on calls is, I hear positive feedback from that from my family.
Anything else on this topic? I'll make a motion to approve this change of policy.
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you, Rick. So now we've got 8, which is the general manager's report.
Juan, while you're donating equipment, we could use a water tanker, so just.
Make those requests, and I'm not trying to be glib about it. Make those requests as fast as possible, because that's how you start it. If it's not this year, maybe it's next year. And quite frankly, that stuff's out there, and everybody's worried about fire throughout the state right now. It's a big issue.
Well, we'll make sure we do that. That's a good suggestion, and the planning committee will bring a request forward to do a 600,000-gallon water tank for Kirkwood.
Well, I think you meant a water tanker.
Tanker, that was
Well,
like.
then I creatively misheard it.
Can we put that on wheels and drive
Yeah,
down?
yeah.
Not worry about the weight.
Less that way.
Go ahead, Michael.
A few items today. Very interesting things going on in Kirkwood. The first is the Caples Creek Ecological Restoration Project. And this is a prescribed burn to the north of Kirkwood in the Caples Creek watershed area. And it's a large area, which I'll show you here on the map. It includes all of the area that you can see in blue, and here's a better map that actually you can see Kirkwood. There's Caples Lake in Kirkwood, and this prescribed burn is it's an entire area. So it's to the north of Kirkwood. It is a prescribed burn. It's probably going to take several years to complete. The Forest Service completed this work on the west side of Luther Pass recently. Those of us that drive that have seen it. It's pretty extensive. We're in a public scoping process right now. The district will be presenting questions with regards to fire safety, smoke, the use of Highway 88 during this period, and other, fire breaks. What are they planning on not letting this get out of hand? So big project, probably takes several years, and it's in the at the same time we've Caltrans has actually accepted bids for the repaving of Highway 88 from the east of Silver Lake all the way to Red Lake. So this is excellent news.
Always state line. All the way to Nevada state line.
All the way to Nevada state line. So this is excellent news. They've accepted bids. They haven't awarded the contract for our area, which is the shorter. It's 70 days of construction, 2.5 months of construction on Highway 88 that supposedly would happen this summer. So our concern, of course, would be the project of a prescribed burn alongside of a construction project might have serious impacts on the travel access to Highway 88, our access for fire, letting guests come in. So we'll be submitting questions and comments to the prescribed burn within the scoping session, and we would welcome to put anybody's comments in with our letters. We did have some erosion along some of the Out Valley line, as you could see. Pretty substantial erosion on parts of it. We have done remedial repairs, gone out there and covered this up, but it got to a point where you could actually see the red tape, above the electrical, and of course, above the electrical line. So these are some pictures of the erosion that was evidence. We are meeting with RCI to go over not only covering everything back up and recompacting it, but putting in water bars so that we can divert the water to get off to the side, and we'll be inviting the Forest Service along with that. We have an annual meeting with the Forest Service later in June, but we'll stay on top of this, but I wanted to make the committee aware. Putting away snow stakes, you can see that most of the snow stakes are done. We're also building a wall at the wastewater treatment plant to help mitigate the problems that we have with the different environments of the wastewater treatment plant, the generators, et cetera, getting into the electrical components. And staff has done a really good job on getting that. That's about 90% complete. And we've reinstituted the doors that lead between the basins and that electrical room to get the humidity out of there. So I think this has been a good project for us, and it protects our electronics. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take those.
Any questions? It's a good report, thank you. And so we'll move on to committee reports, starting with planning.
Covered everything on the agenda.
Finance?
We've covered everything.
Operations, capital projects?
Same.
Personnel, we had a meeting yesterday. We discussed some staffing discussions, some of the things that Michael's thinking about, and some possible ways of saving some additional money and dealing with Social Security primarily. And we're going to bring that back the next meeting, which is in 2 months. And we also discussed, and the trade-off here is, we have, well, I'll leave it at that. Do you think we should elaborate on that, Michael, or just leave it at that? We also discussed and approved adoption of an ACWA JPIA employee assistance program for nominal cost. We discussed and approved this on-call policy that we just approved here. We discussed the general manager's objectives and how Michael's tracking against those after 3 quarters. And finally, we discussed a CalPERS audit of the district in our retirement plan that was a lot of work and that we passed with flying colors. Anything that I missed? That was it. So, committee report on wine tasting. I think that's you, Rick.
I'll give that report. Since the last board meeting, the committee has met, and we're on track for this year's event, which is July 4th. And in fact, in the board's packet on page 173 is the flyer for this year's event. Working with the committee members, and I won't go through all the names, there's been a lot of heavy lifting done by Cheryl Stern and Anna Brady. And we are cranking up to send out another donation letter to some of the homeowners and community members of Kirkwood, as well as going door to door with some of the vendors and local businesses to solicit donations and support for our silent auction as well as for the event.
Okay.
Our next committee meeting will be on the first week of May. I believe it's Friday, May 1st at 2 p.m. here at the district. And I'll also be sending out weekly updates on status and process. For example, the ABC permit is in Alpine County Sheriff's hands right now for signature, and then I'll march that around to all the entities to get it off to get our permit to serve liquor and alcohol for the event. And that's about it for my update, unless there's any questions moving forward.
Okay, good. The annual, it has our 501c3 number on it. That's
Yes,
great.
sir.
Thank you. Any questions for Rick? I just have a clarification on a comment you made earlier. You said that when you first came up here, there was a lot more summer activity than there is in recent years. Is that your experience?
It is. When I first started, it was around 2000, it seemed like there was more summer activities going on, and Kirkwood, in consequence, had more employees here. There were people who lived in reckless housing as well as in the hostel. I would say probably 20 to 30 year-round employees that lived here and worked here, and that has since gone. So.
Okay, thank you. And now we have item 11, which is general discussion opportunity for board members to ask questions clarification, provide information to staff, committee updates, request staff to report back on a matter, or direct staff to place a matter on a subsequent agenda. The only one I had is done the parking subcommittee, and after the May budget review, we're going to decide whether or not to have a special session focused on the budget. And do you want to cover May board meeting schedule or not?
Oh, well, I think we should, that's an excellent idea, to let everyone know what the thought is. The thought is to have actually 2 meetings during the weekend of May, I guess it would be 8th and 9th. The first meeting would be on Friday, May 7th. I think we mentioned it at...
You mean May 8th?
Okay,
But
so
if it's
Friday,
Friday.
May 8th, at 4 p.m. This would be a special meeting of the district. It would only have one item on the agenda. It would be a closed session, discuss capital connection fees. And then the regular meeting would be held on the following Saturday at 8 a.m.
And would you be available for that? The
Can it be
Friday?
remote?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
Okay. With that, unless there's anything else during the meeting?
In terms of meeting dates, the September meeting, is that gonna, the date I have down is the 12th, and the Labor Day activities is the week before, or is that?
No, the problem is, I suspect you have a recurring appointment, which is the second Saturday of every month.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't apply in July, and it doesn't apply in September.
Okay.
So in July, it's the Sunday after the July 4th, and in September, it's the Sunday after the, before Labor Day.
Okay.
So Sunday the 6th
Okay.
of September.
And the only other one that applies there is typically the December meeting is held on the Friday rather than the Saturday afternoon.
All right, thanks.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.